Hey guys, it's Doa. You may think to yourself, hey, Doa's too nice to be on Thorin's channel. Why is he there? And you're right. He's locked me in his closet, and I'm being forced to record this. Help?
Right, this is going to be another episode of Thorin's Big Brains. Obviously, it's going to be my first one for 2024. My guests for this one, you already know Keire. You love him or you despise him. Either way, that is his purpose on this show. Also, we have our other guest, which is Brendan Valdes, who, funnily enough, I've actually been talking about recently in a bunch of interviews. Because I did interviews with a bunch of casters in Korea, and if people don't know, Brendan Valdes is like the invisible extra person that's always involved in every casting duo, trio. It's just everyone forgets he exists. Like, I always tell people, Brendan, you've actually been, not one, you actually were a real LOL fan. You like won a contest to go to Korea. And then two, you've actually casted League of Legends, if people don't know, in Korea from the beginning, literally from like OGN. And put it this way, all you need to know is this: Loco Doco actually played in Korea when Brendan Valdes started. That's the fucking, there's the line right there. Yeah, you're the OG of League of Legends. So where's Brendan?
Yeah, I also cast with Loco.
Yes, at the beginning.
Once he dropped out of the tournament,
yes,
he started casting a little bit, and I also casted with Double Lift as well.
Yeah,
with Mole Trap and stuff. So
yeah,
that was 2012. That was way back when the dinosaurs were in Korea, even before Village started, because they started in 2020 or 2013, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Right, obviously. Brendan casts the LCK and has done for many, 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 many years. So I thought what we'd do is, sadly, even though everyone still pretends they watch LCK, you can always tell when they don't, because things happen like DRX wins Worlds. And they're like, yeah, actually, I always thought like Zika was the best mid laner. Or T1 wins now and they go, they're obviously the team of year. What are you talking about? Like all these takes that you just get, which unfortunately do betray guys. You didn't watch those guys play like, 90 best of threes or whatever they play in the LCK nowadays. So I like on the rosters especially. If you don't know, one of the other things I think's changed about LCK is because you don't get as many Korean players, like named players from LCK that go to LPL. It feels like nowadays the LPL recruits the Korean player through their system. You also, quite frankly, have loads of rosters of players that have just only ever been in the Korean system. So if they've never been to MSI and they've never been to Worlds, I don't blame you if you're a casual fan, but obviously don't pretend you know them, because there are, like, the joke is when some of these players finally break through, you're all like, wow, who's this guy? It's like, we've been watching him for like 4 years, mate. What are you talking about? Like, he's not even like a rookie. So yeah, there's a few names out there where people still say that. So let's get into it. Obviously, the great thing about this offseason was there was so many narratives came out of the power moves. Like, if people don't know, I know the last few off seasons have been like this in terms of Gen.G. They have like spent a lot of money and they've tried to build these big teams. But actually, the Korean scene, if you don't know, it's only every now and then they do these super teams. They did the KT1 a few years ago. I guess you could say maybe some T1 lineups where they had like Khan and stuff was sort of trying to be super teams. But obviously, the joke is, even though T1 just won Worlds and they've re-signed the squad, I actually want to start with Gen.G here, Brendan, because I feel like, at least if you're a fan, because we haven't seen them play a game yet, so it's just an on-paper roster. As an on-paper roster, this is pretty exciting stuff, right? This Gen.G lineup that they've got, if people don't know, I'll quickly read out the roster just in case everyone doesn't know, because I always realise I don't do that on these shows. So what they've done is they've signed Kane from KT Rolster, they've got Canyon from D+/Dam1, they've kept Pays and Chovy, and then they got Lehens back, but obviously he was on KT the last year. What do you think of this roster, Brendan?
I mean, I think on paper it's pretty good. I don't know how it's going to work well together, to be honest. I think that Keen has been so strong individually, and Canyon was strong with Showmaker as a duo, but now you've got like a lot of moving parts, and like you were talking about with the super team, it's kind of like, I think another joke that you always hear is that the super teams always fail, right? They always like kind of go, they're expected to win and then they just drop off, and it's like, what happened? I think we had a little bit of that with KT last year, right? Where the all-pro curse and stuff, they weren't a super team, right? It was something totally different, but it was this idea that, these guys are like unstoppable, they're so good, and then they just kind of like fell off the face of the earth. In terms of what their expectations were. So in terms of expectations...
You're a bit more tempered than I thought, because obviously everyone's hyping this to the heavens, right? They're all believing the dream. It's why I say the fact that it hasn't played a game yet is what sort of lets everyone we can just do it in our minds. You sound more skeptical, though. What are the areas that, like, aside from Keire, are there any other concerns you have with, like, synergy or what the team will be like? Is there some concern that's holding you back from saying they're going to be the best?
I mean, I think that, coming into this one, you have to give T1 kind of the tip of the hat, right, in terms of the best. Gen.G definitely going to be a pretty close number 2. I don't like the takes that are like, oh, they got all these amazing players, they're going to be the best.
Okay.
Like, it doesn't really work that way. as we've seen many a time.
Sure.
I think that Lahens has been a little bit shaky when it comes to like high pressure situations. I think that Pays and Chovy have been very serviceable, very good in high pressure situations, but Chovy has sometimes been a little bit lackluster. Canyon, he is definitely very strong, but the issue I think is that last year wasn't so great for like him and Showmaker, and there were times where he was amazing, like MVP level, and then times where he was actually kind of trash. So that kind of volatility isn't very that doesn't make me feel very comfortable, So while we know he's capable of it, is he going to do it in 2024? I think is a big question to ask. And Keen, same thing. It's like, oh, he was so good, like every day he's the best. We were talking about it, we're guilty of it, or not guilty. I mean, he was the best for so many weeks in a row, and then people watch like I guess the winners finals, right, or the losers finals,
winner bracket final, whatever. Yeah.
T1 KT, and they're like, oh, I thought this guy was supposed to be the best. Like, well, they were saying he was the guy to watch.
They were,
and then he's all of a sudden falls off again. So I don't know. There's some players that are very consistent and very consistently good under pressure, not under pressure. Those are the players that I really rate highly, because sometimes it's just so disappointing to like watch a player be so good and then all of a sudden it's like, where was he? Like, where'd he go?
Well, that's actually a fair lens to apply. I hadn't really thought of that one. Instead of just looking at like how the team might do like every day, you're also trying to figure out like essentially like who would the clutch players be, or who's going to perform if they go to Worlds. You're sort of right on that one. I can't lie. Like some of these names have the joke is only Canyon's really done it at Worlds, right? Aside from that, you're sort of right. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Keire, where are you going on this one? Did you actually hype this roster? When you saw it, did you get like the board of that all the LCK fans did like, oh my God, like, did you?
No, here's the thing. I do have it because put it this way, I love Keen, okay, and I actually like all the top side of the map. Like I think they're excellent. But here's the problem. I thought I was going to be the one that was more down than Gen.G.
Right.
But I've also got like my skepticisms because first of all, when I look at this isn't like easy, in my opinion, easy plug and play.
Okay.
And this could end up being a roster that is like good, but not for like good reasons. As in they're not like a good team, but they have like some of the best individual players and therefore are able to overpower like people who are just worse than them, for example. If a team has Chovy on it, it can only be so bad. Like Chovy wins you like so many games, Avaca of like nothing. You usually have to be either an elite team or a very, very good team to like beat like an okay to like middling team with Chovy on it. Like, and the rest of this team is brilliant. Like Chovy's won the LCK with like Pays. I think Pays is very serviceable. I would never put having Pays on the team into like and Lahens into like super team status.
Whatever,
yeah. Where Pays like this way, the way I said about Pays was he's the best stat stick ADC like in the LCK, where he's just like good at not making like many mistakes, which is a lot of the time a good thing to have with like Chovy. Like if your ADC just doesn't just randomly die or like give up on midsection or create a laning advantage bot lane that's just insurmountable, these are like positive things. For me, because I don't have the insight into the LCK of like the coaching and stuff, this team like needs like really good coaching and really good direction. They need to learn how they're going to move the ball, share the ball. What player is Canyon going to be? And particularly with the new map, Chovy and Keen are going to be probably the most dominant players in these isolated islands. Like mid and top are a lot more isolated. Junglers have less of an influence on the lane because of the terrain changes. So when I'm looking at that, is Canyon going to be more farm focused? Is Canyon going to be going bot lane more with his time? Is Chovy going to be playing to bot? Is this going to be a side laning team, a team fighting team? They're going to have to decide on a direction, and they're really going to have to commit to it, because the problem is T1 have an already decided like formula on how they most likely are wanting to play the game. And you have to beat that. And that formula has been running for 3 years now. They are very refined of it. They've won a world champion on it. They've challenged the best teams in the world on it. And so Gen.G is going to have to try and find that level. So I'm kind of with Valdes here, where because it's a bunch of disparaging parts came together, I've got them below T1 for me, and they're kind of comfortably in like second place. But the expectation is that they should be trying to like get the LCK like off of them. I'm just not sure, because I don't know where the team's going to go, like if that's going to be possible. But it should be really mega fun to watch. As I spoke to you, Thorin, Canyon, Chovy finally getting his go with like Canyon to see like where things, what if he can, be the GOAT with it or like be one of the best players in the world with it will be like super interesting, because I feel like the Showmaker Canyon really did just run its course.
I've got a question for you, Valdes, before I give a take myself, which is, what in the Korean scene is the perception of Lehens? Obviously, he was the MVP last year, and he also got All-Pro, and now he's being signed to this like super team. I've got to admit, Valdes, I've never gotten it. Like, just from an outsider, just watching the games, like I don't know what the vibe is, like if he's like supposed to be some mastermind or something. But just as a player, I think he's always been an above-average support. But I've never seen him as this like I couldn't believe of that lineup that he was MVP, because without knowing the scene, I would have said that Keane or hell, maybe BDD even. Like, these guys were studs, mate. So what was going on? Like, is there a perception he's a mastermind or something, or a captain or something? What's the feeling in Korea?
I would say that for the casual fan in Korea, they would think he's like a mastermind. Like, oh my god, like Singe support, mastermind. Like, he figured out all these crazy things. He can play Elise and all these weird picks. You know, he pulled out the Blitzcrank, and he's kind of like a crazy personality. Like, he's very he shows
is he charismatic?
Exactly what he's thinking. He's very charismatic.
Right.
I would say for a team, like for a team owner or a GM or whatever, you would probably look at him as like, he's pretty strong. He's not the best mechanically skilled support in the game, but he kind of like hypes up the team. You know,
right.
Laughing.
Right.
He kind of like ups the morale, I would say. Of the
okay.
And he's quite strong. And don't get me wrong.
He's a good player, sure.
All these players are like really.
Yes,
really
we're talking about S-tier players here, of course. Yes.
Yeah. Which is why we put them at like number 2.
Yes.
It's just like trying to like, you know, taper down on some crazy.
No, by the way, I also think it's very reasonable to, since you are literally, essentially, you have to contrast them against T1 if we're going to talk about the best LCK team, and T1 is the world champion. So I think it's totally fair to critique them for the things they aren't, being as you pointed out, like, everyone's pretty much already done the thing where you're, I can't believe this lineup's real. Like, we've all done that that was the first week. It's months now, guys. We know the lineup. So here's my thoughts on this team. The problem is, like all super teams, there obviously is the world, like your brain first sees when it sees the names, where you just think, what if they all just play awesome? Like, I even think Keire has sort of opened up the obvious copium there, if you want to believe this is going to be the best team, which is, right now, people do think that some of the terrain changes and some of the actual fundamental game changes to League are much bigger than past seasons. So actually, maybe it will just make like solo laners fucking super sick. Maybe if you're like some god farmers, which it helps if you have fucking Keane and especially Chovy. Chovy's probably the best farming player ever in League of Legends. Like, the joke is, even though ADC was known to be the farming role, like, mid laners just have the mage players and mid laners are gods at farming. We all know that. And spoiler, even though, look, I was obviously going with other players, like I was a fan of Rookie and stuff. If I'm a fan of Froggen and fucking Larson, I have to be a fan of Chovy. There's no choice, is there? Like, what would at that point, like, was it just because the Korean I don't like him? It's the same shit. Just farm the lane perfectly and then make your jungler like fucking play for you, which is exactly where, though, I have a little bit of fear about this team, which is, even though I agree with you, Keire, if we're just doing like that GOAT conversation, because you remember when they all came in the league, you got Chovy and Showmaker and fucking, who was the third one? I'm forgetting. Who was the third one that came along that? I guess maybe BDD was a similar sort of era. When these players were coming along, people were trying to come, because if you remember, BDD used to win MVP of the league, then like Griffin had Chovy and they were like at the top, Damwon came up. When people were doing that discussion, who's the best out of them though? Who's the best mid laner? The problem is, at the time, because Damwon eventually got like the dynasty and were the dominant ones, everyone used to go, which obviously Showmaker. And if you're a Chovy fan, you all know what he used to say. He used to go, let us have a go with Canyon. You know, if you've never seen like fucking Chovy, I mean, some of his teams, mate, he was working with nobodies in jungle, like, give us Canyon, because my problem is this. I don't want to hate on Showmaker. He definitely was at times a very good player. With what he had in resources in his team, sometimes he was fucking mega. But for me, I often said, I think there maybe is only one split ever I would have ever actually given him MVP. For me, out of the two, Canyon was the stud. And I don't want to diss Showmaker here. In fact, the funny thing is, still tell how much people watch LEC. Showmaker, to me, had a bit of sort of Niski in him, where he played with the jungler. You know what I mean? Like, it's like they played with each other, and sometimes for him if he was farming, quite frankly. And the reason I say it depends how much LEC you've watched this, because if you think of Niski from like 5 years ago, you think that's a diss. Niski now actually could also lane, by the way. He's also just a very good mid laner, so it's not even a diss. So I do have my concerns. The other obvious one is the Chovy Keane thing, where like, look, it's not, here's the thing. I will never say that Chovy choked at this last Worlds. That is a narrative that just people press too hard. I would say it's more like he just didn't play his best games. And even then, by the way, you can tell who never watched that BLG series, because he had a couple of fucking good games in that series. Like, he wasn't the reason they lost that series. So to me, I do think the problem is Keane hasn't done much internationally so far. That's been underwhelming at the Worlds I've seen him at. And then Chovy, it's more like I'm just waiting for him to be the MVP of Worlds, for real. Like, he's capable of doing it. He's that good. So I do think the pieces are there. And I think your point's very good as well, Keire, which is even though some super teams can fail, I actually don't think a team with Chovy can actually fail in LCK. Like the other thing about that sort of player who just is a mega farming mid laner and a mage player, they're the ultimate floor raisers. It's why Larson on Koi, they could only get so bad because they've got a player who's always going to win mid and always have his matchup and always a priority. Like that does matter in this game. Like it's why I always say, if you actually want to see the split that showed, that even if you don't like Chovy, he is some sort of god, even if you think he has flaws. It's the ones when he had like the bad hand with life and he was getting them to like the finals, guys. Like if you ever go and look at those rosters, man alive, that is inhuman. Some of the stuff he was doing was bonkers in those seasons. So I will always say this guy's unbelievable. So by the way, any team that has Chovy has the chance to be number one team in the world, in my opinion. Obviously, the main problem here is like how do all these pieces fit around them? Because by the way, the other one I'll just throw out there is I think people got overhyped by Pears being amazing for a rookie, and then they kept almost trying to make it sound like he was ruler. You know what I mean? They would make it sound like he was already too far. Because what was weird was I would sometimes suggest like, I'd maybe try and get like ruler back, and they'd be like, or Viper, and then they'd be like, why? We've already got Pears. It's like, we know what, mate. I'll tell you what. Here's my joke. Go to any team with Viper or ruler and go, I'll trade you Pears for him. See if they do the deal or not. Like, I imagine they'd snap your hand off, mate. Like, that's the best player.
He's the fifth best ADC in the LCK. At the end of the day, fundamentally, he is the fifth best ADC in the LCK. And that's not like a diss against him, because the four people above him are like ridiculously like good, right?
Yes.
But they are not here, like, to take an NBA term, he's not a bus driver. As in, like, he is subservient to everything else.
Yes.
Like, the game and the whether or not Gen.G win or lose, like, games, mostly does not actually come from whether or not, like, Pays is, like, moving around the map with his advantage. So, like, I've never understood, like, why he gets, like, credit for... Basically, he gets credit while other ADCs are having to do absolutely like.
Dude, I think there's two reasons why, and they have nothing to do with him. One is that he's a rookie, and I get it. Look, rookies normally, and they look from Korea, they sometimes do, but rookies normally aren't like the best already. And then two, because everyone heard Ruler left, I think everyone had very low expectations. They were like, they're just bringing in like a rookie, and they lost Ruler, they didn't sign anyone. But like, I agree with you, Keire, right? Put it this way, I'll give you an example. If someone only watched Worlds, they're going to be mega down on KT. But I think aiming is better than Pears, and that's no diss to Pears, because as you're saying, mate, I've seen aiming have to actually win games for KT. Like, the whole thing's just on his back at the end of the game, and he has to do some like bonkers play. By the way, he's also definitely lost some games as well, but that is the nature of being the type of player he is. But I tell you what, he can fucking, it's like at Worlds, he carried a bunch of fucking games, mate. He's part of the reason they were even in the playoffs. So, no, the thing with this team is it's probably the best example ever of a super team that really could be the absolute best. Like, it could do what Gen.G almost did last year, or it could really just be like stuck in second or third, because I actually think like it can't be too much worse if you look at the other rosters, but it could just be stuck behind T1, because obviously the most interesting part, if we flip to T1 now a bit, we can come back to this and talk about some of the other ones later. If we flip to T1, the reason it's really interesting is you've got a super team that basically has almost no pre-existing synergies with all the players, and then you've just kept a team together that actually now is basically like the longest standing lineup probably ever, I imagine, in the LCK. Like, it's ridiculous that they've never changed the play. I know obviously they had the injuries, but aside from that, this, like, you don't actually ever get to see this in League. That's the interesting thing I'd like to start with on the T1 angle, is people think I'm going to be down on T1 because I just didn't think they were the best. I'll tell you what though, I am very interested in the experiment of seeing what happens when you give a lineup 3 years in League of Legends, because if people don't know, I've got two angles on this. One, we just don't see it. Like, one of the things that always infuriated me actually, even in Western League, is even if you have the best team, unless you literally have like G2 in 2019 where they just kept the lineup, most of the times they always change a player, even if they're the best team, so you never get the run back. You never get to see, would you have done it the next year? And then the other angle is, if people know, Keire will know this, because I come from Counter-Strike. In Counter-Strike, it's the same, by the way. In fact, because we don't have the same off-season, arguably teams change lineups more often. But there was one famous lineup. It was a Polish team called Virtus Pro, and they kept their 5-man lineup for 4 or 5 years in a row, something crazy. And what you found was this: because you're not changing players that are like having individual form problems, your team form will go down and you'll have slumps. But if you ever get it back, what you have over every other team is your like chemistry going back. It's going to be just insane compared to theirs. Like, you can be put in scenarios where they've never been in that situation. You've been in that 5 times before. You've been in that final before. You've lost this big. If you actually can ever turn it around, that can be that. Obviously, like I say, day to day, you might have a player that's playing weaker, but if you can get that synergy, that can be a massive strength. And I'll just say, if you look at how T1 won Worlds, I don't think it was just like people playing insane individually. Part of it was like when they're on that T1 lineup, has fucking amazing chemistry. Like the way they moved together. That's why everyone hails Faker as like the god shot caller. Like, it is incredible. Brendan, what do you think of a potential another year of T1?
I mean, I think it's really smart by T1. I know that there were a lot of rumors, especially in the middle of the year, where they were like, well, things aren't going well. There's some injuries. Probably at least 3 guys are going to leave this team. And, they're going to all split up. And that's kind of the expected outcome, right? Because not a lot of people, I think, especially in the middle of the year, expected T1 to win Worlds. But they did get there, and I think T1 has the benefit of course, having the results to back it up.
Sure.
The consistent results outside of the injury time, as you mentioned, that allow them to just keep the team together. Like, it's going to be interesting when we do talk about Nongshim a little bit later, because they kind of were like, let's bring up our challenger team. Oh, they're like, okay, we got 9th place. Let's keep them together. Interesting decision, but obviously very cheap, especially compared to T1. I can't even imagine like what factor, like what fraction.
If it's like 10 times or 5 times,
probably
True.
even more than that. But yeah, T1, very successful. They have the money to back it up. They keep everybody together, and I think it's just really smart. But I do think that they won so much and they had such good results that allow them to achieve that. It's interesting, you think about Damwon, right? Damwon Gaming and then D+. They kind of kept at least the core together, but of course Nuggery leaving, and then they replaced Ghosts and stuff like this. So they were keeping most of the parts together, and they were like trying to keep the dynasty going. And Damwon was really good in 2021 as well, at least at the beginning, but eventually stuff started to go awry. So they just decided they had to change things up. But there's a reason why everybody's like, okay, well, T1 won Worlds, they're just going to do it again. Form notwithstanding, I do think these guys are definitely all individually very well trained. I think that T1 has done a really good job to bring all these guys up essentially through their system and make them into the players that they are. And that allows them to keep this roster together, I would say.
Where are you at on this one, Keire?
So, okay, basically for me, obviously, same point you're making. It's really interesting to see, T1 staying together and what they can get on. They're gonna have a massive advantage in terms of coordination, and if the meta moves around. That one of the T1, even though they often end up in a pick and skirmish style, they are so individually strong, and they are so resilient in terms of a team at in terms of meta shifts at any given time, that they can be good on a variety of different styles, even if it moves away from their speciality, and inside their speciality they're probably the best and one of the best teams I'd ever seen when they hit their peaks. It's actually more I'm interested in terms of a legacy for their players. Zeus for me this year, you're looking at, you want a year of consistency from Zeus, no dips, no random off kilter form. Zeus's objective this year should be the out and out best to second best top laner in the world from start of year to end, and he should be trying to put together a masterwork year. Faker is just adding on to the second half of his legacy, where he's now no longer contending for the best player in the world, but he's now just being the leader of a massive core and bringing through the next generation of LCK superstars. And he's obviously still very independently great himself, in a lot of different middle lane matchups. He still plays them very optimally. He's never actually his game's never completely fallen apart, where he's ever hit bad. I think Owner's the person who gains the most from being in the T1's system in terms of coordination, and it's when Owner's on and not making the mistakes, T1 hits strides as a team that are unbelievable. But his floor of what I've seen in terms of making mistakes is genuinely awful. And the bot lane, I think it's the best execution bot lane in the world in terms of actually winning through bot lane, winning the game by 8 minutes on a tier 1 tower dive, or moving around and affecting a lane. They are unbelievably excellent at it, and they have played together for so long, and both players are just so equally aggressive. They obviously, I don't know their internals, but how agreeable they are in terms of their trading patterns and what they're looking for. It's an interesting one, because maybe who actually leads that lane, Valdes? Because no one ever speaks about that, by the way. Who actually leads in the bot lane? Because I don't know if
is it known who was the vocal player in the bot lane at T1, Brendan?
Guma and Keire?
Yeah.
It's It's probably Guma. I mean, Keire does talk a decent amount, I would say, but mostly in team fights.
Right.
But obviously for us, we also don't generally get comms of
sure.
when they're in the bot lane and just, making trades and stuff like that. But Guma generally doesn't seem like a very talkative guy, but I would imagine he would still lead that lane. Although Keire, he's kind of like more of a team fight oriented kind of guy, or like map focused,
So, because now a lot of people aren't really talking about the thing that I often said about Gen.G last year, where the expectations of if you bring that many talented people together is you have to win everything, okay? Well, the same expectations now lie at T1's feet, where like anything but winning everything for T1, as they are the only fundamental team that remain together and they are the perennial like world champion, you are looking at some sort of like failure or like falling in terms of like they should be trying to win all the LCKs, MSI and Worlds this year, to like continue on with their legacy. I'm not sure like how favoured against the field that they are in terms of just like their strength, but they have like so much moving forward. And I even think if you look at the way the meta is currently right now, from what we've seen in in-houses and LEC, it does heavily favour T1. Bot lane, double range supports, ADC supports, like Ashe, Varus, Caitlyn, all that's getting played. Like Keire and Guma are the best in the world at that. And then you've got isolated top lane matchups where it's like only about skill checking and lane position. That's literally like Zeus's wheelhouse, where he's like second best in the world behind like Ben. And then Faker just can play lots of isolated farm matchups. He's got access to the Ore, the Nico, he's got access to Azir. There's so much that fundamentally suits this T1 lineup. There's more objective spawns with the grubs, so like early skirmishes can be like forced, and I think there's a lot to be said about how things favour. Now, will that continue throughout the year? But I'm actually massively high on like T1, and I look forward to just seeing what the team's going to be throughout the year.
The thing is, I'm going to frame it like a bit differently, because I think you nailed something there, Keire, which is, this is the area where, like, look, if you're a T1 fan, you already think I'm a hater, but let's be real, I'm the best hater of all time, motherfucker. Like, I'm like Kobe Bryant as a hater. I wake up at 6 a.m, I do a session as a hater, I have a nap, I come back and do another session as a hater, I have a fucking lunch with my kids, then I come back, I do another session hating on T1, then I have fucking dinner with my family, then I put in one last night session, just looking up old VODs from 2018, remembering how shit T1 was in 2018, and then I just hate on them and go to bed, and then I wake up in the morning with my alarm and I hate them all over again. Now, I don't really, right, but I am going to seem like a god tier hater with this angle, because the thing about me is, when there aren't like obvious angles, I'll just come up with like a fucking insane one that came out of nowhere. So here's the angle. It's like you said, Keire, right? If you did win Worlds, and they were in some finals, obviously, and they were in position, hence why we all criticised them last 2 years. They were always in position to be number one and to win everything, but they didn't do it until the very end, right? If you do win Worlds, I actually think the expectations, if you keep the same lineup, is you're saying that lineup can win Worlds again. You can saying that they can win everything, like we're saying. Like, if you're in LCK at the end of the day, like, I don't care what anyone says about Worlds, by the way. The number one job of T1, by the way, is win LCK. Like, what are you talking about? Like, to be Korean champions. So, logically, if you're going to win Worlds again and LCK, you are going to be the best team in the world. You're going to be the best team of the year, right? If we're looking at that and we're making that the expectation, not just, is it a really good lineup? Is it an all-time great lineup? And can it be, does it have a chance? Well, the reason why we're going to have to critique some of these players this year, if they don't play awesome, is, let's be real, the actual, what's the term for it? The actual leverage you had as T1 in this offseason was crazy if you wanted to get players. Like, there's probably a world where you could have had, like, fucking Canyon and Viper in this team instead of keeping Order and Gumi. Like, that probably was there. That was probably on the table. I don't know if you would have paid the money for it, but I imagine someone like a Viper probably would have said yes instantly. They'll probably the joke is they'd join thinking they'll win Worlds and LCK, etc. So there is a world where they could themselves have done the super team and upgraded and done all these, like, whatever people thought about those players in the past, they could have said, which is the part I'm interested in, I'm going to spin it now, was the Worlds a one-off for some of them, or is that who they are now? Because obviously the main problem everyone has is, now that they've finally won and they didn't choke in the World's finals, we've all sort of like wiped them clean and we're just going to pretend that's them from now on. I hope it is, but I don't know. Like, the obvious player that I still have my concerns about is Order, because I actually think that Rel play, no joke, is like the main reason they won Worlds. Like, I think if he didn't do that, if you go watch the game, guys, I'm telling you, Gen.G doesn't lose games like that. That would then be 2-1. Even if they lose a one, there's 5. Like, the whole Worlds might be different, but that play was fucking sick, and that was like exactly the sort of shit Order didn't used to do in these finals. I always used to say before before every final because I've just seen it too many times. Like, one of the classic checklists is like, which will be the one game Owner completely ints? Now, look, later in the series, he might get Elise in and win a game, but he'll always have that one game he just ints, and you're like, bloody hell. Because obviously, if your jungler ints, it's going to be very hard to win a series. So if he's really got over that, then cool, I'm down for it. I'm ready to watch this team play because I think he's the player that I always had my question marks on, and I always wondered, is he going to be there long term? So if he can be really good, cool. The bigger issue for me is this one, which is I actually totally agree with the way you characterised it, Keire. When they play their style and their meta, they are the best, and they actually have this really unique quality that I'll give them credit is like the greatest teams of all time. One of the things about being really great is, because the other team sees how well you're doing, they can sometimes get lured into playing your game. And dude, I think when this team was at its best, I definitely think of Worlds, people got lured into not only the style, but the fucking meta. Like, the joke is, the reason I know this is like part of the component is because that was the main thing people criticised T1 for in that lower bracket at MSI, that when they played BLG, it was like, dude, you didn't even play like T1. Like, where's the picks? Where's the style? You just played normal. The joke is, presumably, they must have scrimmed BLG and JDG and just thought, right, league's a bit different now, so we're going to change to their style. I think if T1 does that, then they won't. Essentially, I don't think they have the 5 best players. So if it's just some like global meta and everyone's playing the same and the same picks, and like maybe it is just a lane focused game now. If it's just like that, I don't think T1 will be the best. If they can get their meta and their style again, they've proven over 2 years that when that works, they are fucking sick. I mean, I've always said to Monty, it's such a weird style to do as well. Because if you remember like 2 years ago, the problem with the 2 years ago, it's 2024 now, guys, so I'm talking about 2022 when I said 2 years ago. If you remember 2022, they even had that style where they would just like avoid team fights and they would just choose where the skirmish would take place.
Yeah,
I always used to say to Monty, dude, like the other teams are playing into their hands here. Like, they're letting them do that. Like, you can't just force team fights illegal. You can just go to the Baron when it's up and make them have a time. But for some reason, these teams would just sort of like, they were the perfect dance partner for T1. Like, if T1 led, they would just follow like, oh, this is what we're doing now. And then suddenly everyone, it's like the joke like we used to say about TSM, everyone got mind controlled into playing how they wanted, and then they get to win. So if that happens, of course they could win again. That's actually the cool thing about keeping the lineup. They don't have any question marks. They know how these players play. They know all the relationship. They probably even know what things to work on now. So if that happens, it's actually plausible. This is what's funny, T1 fans. I found an angle to hate on you, but I also found the angle where you could be the best. So we'll see on that one. Obviously, the other angle as well is I don't actually need Gen.G to be better. I'll just pick BLG or whoever the best LPL team is to go. So listen, there's always angles, guys. You have to understand there's always an angle to take. So anyway, does anyone have any stylistic thoughts on T1? Because obviously that is actually, I think, the most interesting part of this team. I know people focus on the individuals. I think the style they play is, I don't think anyone's ever played this style in League of Legends.
Right,
I think the
found
thing
it.
Go on, Brendan.
Yeah. So the thing about T1 always, even in just the LCK, but also you were talking about how they kind of like everybody is just drawn towards like some kind of like black hole. Everybody has to kind of have that style of T1. It happens in the LCK. Everybody, they have this huge fan base. They have insane expectations, right, all the time. So the players are like, okay, we have to like reach a certain level. We have to play at a certain level, and it's an immense amount of pressure. So first thing I wanted to say was like, shout out to Owner and shout out to these guys for actually like under that insane pressure in the Worlds semis or, then eventually the finals to actually overcome that and actually hit that. Yeah. Now, the issue is now we're going into another year where it's like, well, you guys have won Worlds. Well, you're going to do it again, right?
Yes.
And if they lose a game, it's like the world is going to end, right? Because everybody's going to be like, oh no, they were the world champion. They're supposed to be the best. How could they lose to this weird KT roster, roster? It's going to get a bit even more intense, I think, which is kind of scary, I would say, for T1
more pressure
players, because it's even more pressure, even more than they already had, which is insane to even think about. So I hope that the players and the team can kind of like take a step back, and maybe they did by like not adding anybody. They were like, oh well, we achieved our goal, we finally won Worlds, now let's like take a victory lap. We did it in 2023, maybe we can do it again in 2024. Let's keep the band together and have one last tour, or I don't know how long they'll stay together, but I do think there is an angle where maybe they just don't win Worlds and it's okay, but I don't think that the fans are.
That'll never be okay to T1 fans, I can tell you now. Exactly. I can tell you now, that'll never be okay.
Let that be okay. That will never be okay, but that might just be the way
it's reality. Goes. Yeah, exactly. It's as that famous saying goes, some people don't like it, but it do be like that, as the eternal quote goes. Come on then, Keire.
a thing that I've not seen really anyone talk about, and I was actually like, I don't tend to talk about it, but I think it's apt if you're talking about this individual. They demanded Coma to join.
Oh, it's true. Yeah, we're forgetting that.
Yeah, the players, Keire and Faker reportedly demanded that Coma join as head coach once again and be brought back into the fold.
Right.
Now that's like crazy to me. And now we're going to get this roster with the Coma Faker version of like League of Legends, and you know.
All right, here's the thing I'll just do. Before you go in, Keire, I'll give you the joke, right? But what warning, this is a disrespectful joke that will make Team 1 fans very upset. I don't know why I did that disclaimer. The whole show's like that. Just stew it out if you can't handle it. Right, the joke is this, right? This is why, low-key, I'll never hate on Coma, by the way. I will say there's two details people don't know. One is, he was the strategic coach, which means he did do the drafting and stuff, but people do mistake that he was the head coach, whereas actually, if you know how the structure works, that wasn't what he did in T1 back in the day. So they do mistake that part. But then the other part was, it's not that I don't think he's the greatest coach ever. He certainly could be. It's just the problem is, if you know how good peak Faker was and how good some of those lineups were, it's like you just had the best resources too. It's like certain players in sports have had the best player in insane teams, and it's hard to know until they go to other squads how good are they. But my joke is this, right? Coma already won all the rings. He sat on them out. He could do his own Faker type picture with all his trophies. It'd be God tier, right? But here's my problem, Coma. Why are you ring chasing? So when Dan won, you were like, hey, can I get in here and can I get one of these worlds that are going without Faker? And now when T1 won again, you're like, can I come back, guys? Hey, I'd like to coach again. It's like, mate, why are you just joining when they win worlds? Like, what's that? Like, you're supposed to be the one that makes them win worlds pro. But anyway, I don't hate on. By the way, the joke in the T1, if you know the behind the scenes, is since they did essentially win worlds without like a traditional coach, they just put someone in that role. There's the other reason, by the way, that people forget, which is why everyone thinks Faker's a god, because the joke is we think he like coached himself, his own team, essentially. It's probably not totally untrue if you think about his status within the org, but it's certainly a big deal that they're bringing this guy back, though. I mean, he's surely going to have some input. He's not just going to sit there and just go, maybe play a league sit. Surely he's going to get, like, say over the team and how they play and stuff. What do you think, Keire?
So the thing was, is that I actually, like, this is a conspiracy, but I don't think this would have happened if Asia Games didn't happen, because he coached the team
them, right?
Yeah,
right.
And Faker went to the Asia Games and he coached that team. And I think
he was in the bar like having a drink. Hey, remember those good times? Oh yeah, like, you know, what if it'd be crazy? What if we played together again? You know, would they do that? You think we get like reconnecting?
But like, here's the thing: like the T1 players have literally just gotten it over the line with the coaching staff that they had, and they basically turned round to them and went, fuck you guys, we're getting Coma. Like,
in a way, sure.
like Coma, who hasn't won them anything, who hasn't coached the majority of the players. Faker's just looking at the 3 world trophies and the 1, and he just like smiles and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna get Coma to coach me. Fuck this guy. Like, and here's the thing. From people, what people have basically roughly reported, the team is Faker driven, like Faker run, like arguably Faker like player coach, and he just like the coaching staff like kind of help him bring his vision into it, right? But here's something: Coma might be one of the only people that Faker is subservient to, because you know, like creating hierarchy and like structure. You know what I mean? Like Coma is like higher up in terms of seniority, way higher up in terms of seniority of someone like Faker. Plus, he has like all the success with with Faker and doing it. And so I don't know if you're going to have this like, for one of the first times, the possibility of a conflicting vision in terms of like execution of the game. Now, obviously, it could go hand in hand and it could be kumbaya and amazing, but it's like something that I know a lot of people haven't really talked about, because T1's the way they play League of Legends has really moved on to what like Coma ever thought about the game, or like how Coma teams like executed throughout the years. So
you know what's really sad? I've just realised this is like the worst thing about being in League is you start to predict the patterns of what will happen. You know, the saddest thing I've just realised is I actually realised logically, if this team doesn't do well, actually the first person they'll blame is Coma, not the players, because Coma wasn't there. Like they'll use that sort of like. So the worst thing is, I don't want to see this world, right? Imagine a world where the truck is just like Coma out, like a Wenger out, basically. Keire, like that'll break my heart, because like, you built that. You like made T1 with the ass. Like, I don't ever want to see that. So even if you're the biggest T1 fan ever, please don't say fire Coma. Like that's too much, guys.
Also, the thing about Coma is he's, I've met him multiple times. He's a very wholesome person. He's also very close with a lot of the T1 players, like over the years, right?
Oh, right.
Baker, or like I'm not sure about the newer players.
Yeah.
Right? They probably know each other and have met multiple times, I'm sure. But he's very close, I would assume, with Faker, right? So I think that coming into this one, it is an interesting kind of thing you raised, Keire, because it's like, On one hand, he should be very close, and it should be like, well, Faker, you guys have done really well. Maybe we can just kind of like keep going with what's working and not really change anything. But on the other hand, I think Coma as a coach is somewhat controlling and has his own vision of the game.
Yeah.
Might say, okay, well, what about this? Like, how about we like try to do what I want to do, and then that might cause some problems. I'm not sure, but from what I do,
what if they start playing from bot to top?
Players.
Like, if they start playing like the standard, they start playing for a pure topside advantage, where like every single bot lead is just they attempt to convert it instantly into a top lead, which is like a hallmark of like Coma's like view on League of Legends, and defined an entire era of like LCK, like attempted to copy it. Like, I think that makes T1 worse. Genuinely, like I think it does, but
that's why to me I say, like, essentially my only fear is that like it just becomes where they don't have their distinct style, and it's just like it's like a fucking ARAM. It's just like, how good are the players? If that happens, I don't think T1 wins. By the way, the joke I've just thought of, obviously it's straight fire, is obviously people know Koma's married, right? He got married after he'd already won a bunch of championships, because in Korean culture, like, you sort of like wait till you've accomplished things to like build the family and stuff. So basically the joke would be, do you know what role, Keire, that Faker must have played at the wedding?
Oh no!
Well, obviously, ring bearer, wasn't he? He gave Coma the ring, didn't he?
No,
it's not bad. It's not bad. It's not bad. Listen, you saw where I was going on that one. I crafted it. You know, it's pretty well. And I kept it respectful. There's nothing bad about being the ring bearer. He just gave him his rings, didn't he? So what do you know?
Not bad.
And now he's back for more. He's back for more rings. By the way, the other angle I would actually ask about with this team is, right, Brendan, here's the question I have, because in the West, we get a really distorted version. Like, it's basically only if it gets to Reddit and they have the pictures of the trucks and stuff, right? Was it really the case that, like, is it just if they ever lose, if they ever, like, don't win LCK, do they have to really be number one all the time? Like, if the team plays well but they lose, do the fans still, like, can they be sort of, like, kind to them? Do they let them up? Do they really have to be number one all the time, do you think, the T1 fans, for them to be happy?
Well, first off, with any gigantic fan base, right, you're going to have the majority of people which are just like, oh, you know, they did well. Like,
of course, sure.
Player, you know, like, they were good, guys, come on.
Yes.
And then they also have this massive minority, and it's massive because of the massive fan base, right?
Oh,
so they have all these people that are crazy, and they buy these trucks, and they say, you know, get this coach out. Like, that happened multiple times over the year for T1 and for other teams as well. Less so for other teams because they're not as popular. You know,
understandable.
The amount of trucks is directly proportional to how popular.
I mean, the joke is if KT fans did that, they'd all be bankrupt, wouldn't they? Because like you'd have to do every split pretty much except one ever in history. So yeah, that's why if you're KT fan, you don't
every week you never know. Like,
you just send an e-truck if you're KT. You send a card, like, you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's real, right? There are some fans who are very demanding, and they're like, this is not okay. This lineup is amazing.
Yes.
It's got Faker. It's got, you know, all these great players. Why aren't you winning? Get that coach out, right? And that happened multiple times over the year. And, you know, there were some times where it was when T1 was struggling and injury issues were going on, but there were other times where they had a pretty good week, and we were doing our own podcast, right? And we would talk about, you know, like, you know, T1, probably they're going to get, you know, slammed once again on the internet, even though they played quite well. So it's definitely a real thing. Like,
by the way,
it's not rational.
Being as obviously this 5-man lineup was critiqued and had literally the trucks, and at the time people basically wanted like a bunch of them fired and not to be here in the offset. Now that they've won Worlds, is the sense in Korea that this is actually one like the best teams to ever play? Is that like the vibe now?
I would say so. I think that especially their performance at Worlds and the names that they had to take down, right? Like pretty much every strong Chinese team along the way kind of does give them that. But again, like, did
Korean fans actually, before they beat them, give like Gen.G credit of like it is the best team and therefore beating them's like a big deal? Was that like kind of the vibe, do you think?
Yeah, I would say so. I would definitely say so. Although the hype is always there with T1, where it's like, no, T1's going to be the ones to do it because they're in the perfect position, and like, they're you know, I love them. They're the best. They're going to do it, and they actually did, which was surprising for a lot of us. Actually, I didn't actually personally think that T1 was going to win that, but props to them. They did step up and get it done. So yeah, I would say that people do rate them pretty highly because of their you know, end of the year and what's wrong. And how strong it was, right? Because if over the year they were like a little bit wishy-washy, I mean, they were still very strong, right? Don't get me wrong, but in terms of like expectations, as always, when you're talking about T1, it's a totally different conversation you're having. But yeah, I would say because of that, you know, end of the year run, people definitely rate them very highly. for sure after at the end of this year, especially like even for Faker as well individually, like because he was mostly just kind of like the player coach, the guy who was kind of keeping all the kids together, and but now he had like multiple big plays as well.
Oh, sure. Oh, that kind of brought his rep back as a player, right? Sure.
Yeah. So people were like, "Holy shit, he's back! Faker is real. Like he is the god," you know. And that hype is going to last another 10 years, no doubt. So, you know, they have that in spades. On the T1 side. And
by the way, I'll just throw this out there if people want to get a sense that like it wasn't the case that like everyone 24/7 rode T1 the whole time. The way you know actually that like at Worlds it was a surprise that they had this amazing performance and won is everyone watching this show now who speaks English and says they watch the LCK, you all fucking hate on Wolf 24/7 because he's such a biased T1 fan. Dude, even Wolf picked LNG to win that fucking quarterfinal. And look, I know now you're going to go, what? But like at the time, it looked good on paper. Like Scout was doing awesome. The team was good. People thought that was like the third best team in the world or something. Like I'm just going to say, even though he did get hated on like a motherfucker, you can imagine. Like even Wolf had the balls to pick LNG. Look, didn't maybe work out well for him, but fair play to him. He did give that one up. Okay.
I've just got a picture of Wolf, the former T1 support player.
No. I mean, fucking the other one, obviously. Yeah,
I know. But I'm just imagining him just like being on a T1 street.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, and I'm just going, I think LNG are going to win this one. And he's right,
It's a bit like that thing I said on somebody inside, but I'll make the point here in case people didn't see it, which is the one thing I actually thought was like a weird fan reaction. I don't know if you saw this, Brendan, but because fucking Keire was doing that casting from the T1 offices, you know, when they got to the final, he had to announce like, oh, I can't do the final, I can't do the casting anymore, guys. Like they say I have to leave the offices, right? And people were all like, what the hell, boo, like T1 should just let you stay. But someone made a point, right? And when I saw it, I was like, they're exactly right. It's like, you know, Keire obviously does a stream persona, and his stream persona is that he's the shy fan and wants Weibo to win, right? Someone made this point. They said, if you know Korean culture, can you even imagine having a guy in your offices who, when your rival wins the world championship over you, by the way, from China at that, and he runs around your office screaming like, yeah, Weibo, like the shy, like I even agree with them. That was the right move. Like that was essentially they got ahead of a problem. Though. By the way, imagine the trucks then. If there's someone streaming from inside the T1 office, the joke is like you'd have to like surround the building at that point in time and have like airlift him out off there with like a helicopter, like Vietnam or something. Like guys, like that T1 was, even though you might think sometimes they're ridiculous, they were right on that one. They sort of saw the problem coming on that one, and they didn't go over the edge of the cliff. So fair play. That one I agree with. I don't see there's any problem with that. Luckily, they didn't win anyway, so it didn't matter in that sense. By the way, let's flip to another team now then. So even though actually, funnily enough, there are other teams that are good, I think we should just do the obvious KT part, even though we could go straight to Hand We're Live. Just because, let's be real, like if you think of the history of the LCK, KT has nearly always been a contender. They had that like 1 year with BDD, basically it was kind of whack, but it was also not a very good roster if you go and look at that. There's a reason why this team is always up there. And obviously the saddest thing, if we look at this roster, is they did go from literally, as Brendan says, by the logic of the LCK fans, they had the 5 best players in the LCK. They didn't, but that's just the way that they think if you're number one, etc. Now, they didn't keep nearly any of them, because if you don't know, like, they kept BDD, that's it. What they did is they got Deft and Beryl is the bot lane. Now, we can get to this. Why that bot lane's being recreated, I don't know. Like, at this point, Beryl must have just, like, I don't know, fucking pulled Deft out of a burning car or something. I don't know how that got happened. And then they brought back Pureshik from Team Liquid, because World's winner of that. You know, again, there's a lot of memes hiding behind this roster. And then the top laner is Perfect, who is, like, wasn't he, like, some sort of, like, a challenger player or something, Brendan? He got, like, I think he got promoted or something, right?
Yeah, he was a challenger player.
What do you think of this roster?
He wasn't even...
Oh, he wasn't like a top prospect necessarily, right?
He was like top 5 top laner. He was good, but he wasn't the best.
Right.
He's a flipper. He flips so many matchups. Yeah. He needs to learn matchups. Like someone genuinely needs to teach that man matchups. It's ridiculous the flipping that he does. And if you've got a team with Deft on it and BDD, the last thing I want is some cunt in top lane flipping matchups. Like, I'm sorry. That's some amateur fucking rookie dickhead just flipping the entire game before Deft can like start painting his masterclass. I can't handle it. Another year of it. Plus I've got Beryl who might just like be on a phone game midway through and just like lose it all as well. And then they've decided to invite Fish Flips back for the jungle, just to the creme de la of impossibly bad players that have won Worlds. Like, when I rewatched that when I watched that World's Final, it is unbelievable how many smites that he misses. It's unbelievable how bad he plays in that World Final and then wins, and then the players in that are hugging him and shit afterwards, and I'm just like, bro, hug him. I was like, I mean, even though I've won just Worlds, I'd actually be on the league client and writing out the report, by the way, like for Game 5, just like missing, like getting outsmited by the Vampire.
But I can't lie, that would be pure banter if someone won Worlds but just stopped on the PC instead of celebrating to submit a report for their jungler, like grief in the game. Because I wonder if you can do that through the tournament client. I don't think anyone's ever checked if you can, but like that would be banter if you did do that. Fair play if like Zika or someone did that. Like, this guy, you need the fuck out of me, like, then just press enter, send report or whatever. By the way, here's the thing. If we start off with this one, I have to question quickly for Brendan again. I have to like check the Korean scene. Just like the Lehens question, mate, what is the perception of Beryl in Korea? Because I mean, on my shores, dude, he's another one of those players that if you're from the West, he's kind of a meme. Like we sort of like think, like, was he ever, like, for me, he was never ever the best support. Like, he's maybe like top half sometimes. I don't know. I kind of think he's overrated. But then again, I don't know what. It's just some like, there's some perception that he's, if people don't know, as far as I know, Brendan, people actually perceive it that like he's the one who started like a lot of the Keire shit, right? And did the weird picks and stuff, right? Is that what the people, what's the feeling, Korea? Because it seems like he's pretty hyped.
I think his reputation is that he's just a little bit of a outsider. You know, he doesn't really mesh with everybody. Okay. You know, he kind of has his own view of the game and stuff like that.
He definitely has swag. I'll give him that. He seems like he's got a very strong opinion. Yeah.
And we can kind of see that in some of the games when he does some very questionable things that doesn't make any sense, right? We're watching, we're casting, we're like, what in the fuck is this guy doing, right? But we can't say that on the broadcast, obviously. But, it happens multiple times over the course of the regular season, and we're just like, what is he doing? Is he trolling? Like, why is he playing like this?
I do appreciate, by the way, especially if you cast the LCK, you can't really be like, what the fuck's he doing? You have to be like, I'm not sure this is the optimal play for the jungle in this match. Like, I know, I love it. Go on.
Very sarcastic. Yeah.
Exactly.
We have a lot of leash on the LCK at least. But yeah, I will say that Beryl did have the one season, which was summer 2020, where he was quite good. And I think it was, I always talk about this, it was MSC because it was...
the online one, yes.
And they played against China and they got absolutely, like, just, like, destroyed. It wasn't close. All the Korean teams kind of got wrecked. And Beryl, in interviews after that, he was like, that kind of, inspired me to practice and he was a hater, he was waking up at 6 a.m. He was like practicing so much. He said that he was practicing every day, like 14 hours, like going crazy. And that was his best form. After that, I think he kind of just, he's kind of just floating around like a leaf in the wind, and he's still good. Like he has the ability, but he just doesn't show it because I think in the games, he's doing very questionable things that can lose his teams very big leads that they have, or it's very questionable for sure. And I think that he does have kind of that reputation now in Korea where people are just like, you never know what to expect with this guy. Like he could make a good play, but more often than not, nowadays it's like, you really know. And I'm sure, I didn't go into the Korean forums when it was released, but I'm sure that especially for Def, someone who has like so many fans, and now he's playing with Beryl this year after what has been like a good, 2 years. It's like a lot of people definitely were kind of shaking their heads, questioning. Like,
I'm actually surprised by that.
Why
because I was thinking this was going to be choices. This was going to be like the Hen situation, and people just have a different perception of him. But actually, I guess in this scenario, it must just be that he's a popular person. Like, that's why people I guess they're meme hyping him, right? Pretending he's the best. Like when he was doing the world's draws, being like, oh my god, the genius Beryl or whatever. Like fair enough, okay. That's actually interesting. Apparently, Keire, the fans agree with you. They wanted Def to have a better lane support.
Here's the thing, it's really weird. I can remember, this is like a strange one, this was maybe like 2022 or 2021, where Lehens and Beryl were considered like scrim gods by the LPL teams. Okay. Like, they were considered like, LPL teams, like even on like the ping, would want to like scrim the teams just because like Lehens and Beryl were like breaking their minds of like some of the stuff that they were doing. But, and the thing is like, to talk about players like Beryl, and like absolutes, like doesn't really colour you like the correct picture. Where Beryl is like a problematic player and he has very defined like strengths and weaknesses. But when he's on like the right environment, where his weaknesses aren't as a problem, like for example, you pair him with Death, who's like arguably one of the best laners still in the LCK, candidate for the best ADC of all time. Very rarely makes like any mistakes. almost like the hallmark like body of like what you would want any ADC to be, then it tends to be more of his strengths come through than any of his like given weaknesses. Because you can end up having to pinch a bunch of barrels like annoying support picks and stuff like that. And the problem with me is any team if it has BDD and Deft on it, right? You instantly are looking at a team that should be looking to win LCK and then looking to like go to Worlds and make deep runs at Worlds, or trying to be one of the best teams of the year, okay? And then you fill it with 3 players who, for me, are not going to be able to like carry that vehicle and like going to be able to bring that like into motion. Dex in the twilight years of his career, he didn't win like an Asia medal, so he does have the military service clock ticking to the best of my knowledge, and as such, like he doesn't have like the frugality to be wasting years, in my opinion, on like projects like that. I think that's teams directly worse than KT from last year, and it's kind of really sad that like. For me, BDD basically had like a second feather in his cap, like a resurgent year. I think his laning was like impeccable. I think he enabled so much of the speciality team comps, particularly like the TF on like KT, and he was a fantastic mid laner. It doesn't have to you don't have to just be better than like Chovy for me to like say you're like good. He was great throughout the year, and for me, I just look at this KT and it just looks like a waste of BDD and Death time. And it's just a complete misallocation of resources. I'm actually super disappointed in this like team's construction. I think the problem is with those 2 players in the back line, and it's not even like the other ones are going to be bad. You can only you can only be so like terrible. But I don't think there's anything here to even like challenge Gen.G. I definitely don't think there's anything here to challenge like T1. And they could end up actually fighting it out in like the middling pack versus some of the other teams. I don't think there's anything here to say that they're going to get like 3rd or 4th, like guaranteed. They could end up being like a struggling middling team, which is fucking tragic if you've got those players on the team.
The main problem for me with this team is I sort of agree with you. Like, if people don't know, this is a team that is the ultimate test of if you actually watch the LCK regular season. Because if you watch the LCK regular season, you will know that like it doesn't matter that D+ couldn't have, by the way, they couldn't have done anything at Worlds. It wouldn't even have mattered if they'd have made the round of 8. They would have probably lost to almost everyone except NRG. But basically, like, that wasn't a good team, but Deft was really good on it, believe it or not. He actually was. The joke is, he was better on D+ than he was on fucking DRX when he won Worlds. Like, he actually was pretty good last year, but you wanted to watch the regular season and just bot lane to see it. And then BDD, because obviously, like, people will think, they did bad in the playoffs of LCK and Worlds. Like, he wasn't even the reason, by the way, that they did badly. And BDD was awesome in the regular splits. Like, he was probably even underrated. He was really good as a mid. So these 2 players, I agree with you, Keire, they are 2 of the absolute best you can get in the LCK, even though their names maybe suggest to a fan who only watches Worlds, like, that's from years ago, they're good. No, these 2 are mega right now. The problem then is the players like Beryl and Pioshik. Yeah, I know they've only won Worlds 1 and a bit years ago, but the joke is we don't really give them like the same credit for winning Worlds as the greatest teams anyway. Like, even at their peak, no one give them and I have to say, as someone who's watched Chovy's whole career, one of the most painful periods was when Pioshik was his fucking jungler. Like, this guy was one of the worst I've ever seen for like flip, but it's not like you flip and you either win or lose the game. You might win if you get the heads on the flip. If you get the tails, you definitely lose. He would have some games like that were like nightmare games. Him and Morgan, everyone knows, used to fucking in that guy so hard when Chovy was like already the best farmer. So I'm just worried in this sense, like, this just looks for real like one of those moves where I always say the problem with esports is it's not like traditional sports, because in traditional sports your level tends to be pretty consistent and you can have like a 20-year career. So the problem is if you tell someone, but our support and jungle won Worlds in 2022. In sports, that's fine. That's only a few years ago. Maybe they could be the best. Like, 1, they weren't the best when they won anyway. And then 2, in esports, a year or 2 years ago, maybe 5 years ago sometimes, like, people really do just drop off and come up to different, and that form is like that. It's kind of crazy in this game. It's why actually when people like Faker can maintain any form for that long, they don't even have to be the best at the end. Just to do it for 10 years is mental, and to be on a tier 1 LCK team. Like, if you look, there's only like Deft aside from him doing it. And by the way, you could even argue of the 2 positions, it's way harder to do it as a mid laner, in my opinion, than ADC. ADC really is sort of a similar role, and it is somewhat on the rails. In fact, I'd even say ADC is the least blamed if you don't carry, because you can go, the team didn't set me up, I didn't have items. If you're the mid laner, there's no excuse. You just start farming from level 1, mate. If you're the best, you're the best. So there's a reason why the ADCs don't get the criticism that Ruler never got the criticism that, or Viper, that fucking Chovy did. I'll tell you that, boys, no matter what happened to their team. So I'm just scared for this team because I feel like on paper someone might get tricked into thinking this is actually going to contend and maybe even like has a dark horse chance to win. Whereas I'm with you. I actually think for real, there's probably even a world where this team could place below like one of the teams that isn't even that good on pit. They could come like 5th or something like that. Like I think that's even plausible. Yeah, I'm kind of scared for KT. Even though, normally they're dangerous to get excited for them, I'm actually scared that they'll just be bad this season. I'm really worried because I agree with you, Keire. If this is the last year of like Def's career, kind of a whack way to go out. Surely he could have had one last run, especially after the D+ year.
Valdes, why is Thanatos a free agent and not on a team?
I wish I had the answer to that.
Because that's the pickup. At the end of the day, KT should have chopped off both their arms, right? Chopped off like Perfect's arms, right? So he can't play any more League of Legends, right? And they go get Thanatos. And that because
he was mega hyped. If people don't know, right? He was like the person who said was going to be the shit, right?
Or you can insanely good.
Yeah, exactly.
He was insanely good. Like if you watch Challengers, he was playing against those players, and he kind of looked like, okay, I'm just. He almost looked like, like a 10-year-old playing with 8-year-olds, right?
Right.
Like, oh, I'm just
throwing everyone about the gym.
Like, more developed than you guys. Like, I'm just gonna win this game, right? And it was really exciting, right? I'm just happy we got Lucid. We'll talk about him, I'm sure, in a little bit, because he was like the other one guy from Challengers that everybody was like, please, Lucid, like get him in here. Yes. So we were expecting Lucid and Thanatos to at least play in a major region, and didn't get Lucid. Where's Thanatos? That's a great question.
Ian took another job from a Worlds. Mate, I'm telling you something. These fucks at DRX, right? They have made a killing off of winning that one Worlds, by the way. Let me tell you, it is actually unbelievable. There's another Czech stealer in this league. It's Effort, and he makes an absolute living having been on T1. Because that man stepped foot in the T1 office, right? And he wore a T1 jersey. He is somehow still allowed to play in the LCK, right?
Dude, but you know what's crazy, Keire, is no one ever says he was really good on T1. They just say he was on T1. You're right. They just say that line. They do just say that line. You're right.
So I'm like so done. And to me, like I think we're all kind of in agreement. Like you look at this KT roster, and it's like what could have been. I can live with Beryl being on the team, by the way, because as I said, there's like Beryl isn't just like strictly like bad. Okay. It's just he's got like clear strengths, clear weaknesses. It's just more frustrating to watch than anything else. Whereas like. At a LCK tier 1 level, I actually don't think Perfect and Fosheg are really acceptable, to be honest. And I think very quickly this team's going to realise they're somewhat like going to be like wasting their time, unless like for some strange unknown reason this LCK rookie top just gets like 10x better every 10 months and just starts gobbling up like experience. But I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen. Looking at like his pedigree, so I don't know. I'm just fucking sad about KT, to be honest.
I mean, I would assume I don't know what the other guys on the the LCK casters think. I was talking a little bit with Chronicler about it, but yeah, not super high on KT roster. I kind of agree with like they even have the potential to fall to like 5th place because BDD and Deft great in the regular season. Beryl and Pioshik awful in a regular season.
Yes,
like it's so crazy. The difference between two players between the others, and then Perfect, of course, is just like a wild card. You don't know what you're going to get. Maybe he does 10x, or maybe he just is the same player and he flips. And we have some players like that in the LCK as well, where it's like, okay, well, you're good. You obviously have the hands and stuff, but you don't have any brain. You just kind of like go all in, and sometimes you make a super play, but sometimes you just get wrecked and you're just invisible. So I think that Perfect will be that guy. I think he's just going to sometimes be like, whoa, this guy, he's got some hands. Like, he's really good. You should watch Challengers. And then other days it's like, please don't don't remember he was a Challengers player because I don't know this guy. So I am worried because if Perfect, Pioshik, and Beryl are all here and kind of just like wandering about in regular season, BG and Deft, they can't carry it alone. I mean, maybe they will some games against like the lower half, but yeah, I think there is a very good chance that some better formed teams as a 5-man unit will beat KT Rolster at least 1 out of 2 times in a regular season in a double round robin. So I am worried for this team. If they do make it somehow to like playoffs or even like Worlds or an international, like maybe Pioshik and Beryl just kind of put on their, okay, we've done this before hats and change into that other player that we know is possible. Yeah. Otherwise, I don't really see them having that much lasting success. So it is kind of sad for sure.
Perfect is bad Summit. There you go. I found the perfect analogy. Perfect is a bad version of Summit. There you go.
Summit was I mean, he was good, but he wasn't even that great.
Yeah, I'm just talking about in terms of...
He means it when he was in Liquid as well. Yeah, and he's not... Here's the difference. We all loved the Sandbox Summit, Brendan. The problem is that guy's gone, and whoever Team Liquid Summit and Cloud9 Summit say, we can't get rid of that guy. He won't leave the house or top lane ever, or change beyond 2.5 picks for some reason. What's mad is I love top laners, but like, what's weird is you've noticed that's the only one, Keire, I've never really got all in on out of the ego top laners, because there's a reason why. It's not 2013 anymore. You can't only play top lane. You have to group eventually into a flank, mate. So here's the other team, the obvious other name to talk about. Like I said earlier, if you actually look and you want to talk reasonably about who could be a good team, it's the Hanwha Life one. What's funny is this just shows you how that whole like super team tag is really like just biased to do you like the players, because you do know on paper you could argue this is a super team. Think about this, guys. Their lineup is Thorin, right? Obviously he was never an amazing player. He's an LCK champion, by the way. So we have Thorin top lane, then we have Peanut jungle. If you don't know, by the way, Peanut has something like 6 LCK titles, MVP multiple times. Again, great, one of the greatest junglers of all time. They kept Zika mid lane. They've got Viper ADC still, and then they got Delight from Gen.G. Like, by the way, it just won the LCK, etc. Like, you could argue, by the way, Zika's won Worlds, obviously, as has Viper on EDG. You could argue on paper this is a super team, even though people aren't doing that. Like, and if people don't know, very quickly before we get into this lineup, years ago when Hanwha Life first came into the league, and initially, you remember they had that like dodgy ass lineup. I think they even had, I think they actually had CV Max or something early on, or someone like that. I think it was the coach, and then eventually they got Chovy in, if you remember, at one point in time, and they had that lineup with Chovy and Deft, etc., which was like only them. If you don't know why people like Chovy would join the team, I remember when they first joined LCK as an org, Loco told me, oh, go and look into this org, like just as a company in Korea, not the org Hanwha Life, but go and look in who Hanwha Life is. And if you look it up, you can tell me this, Brendan, it's like a massive company in fucking Korea. Like, people might not know the name, so they might think, oh, this team can't compete with the Gen.G. Dude, the joke is, if I had to guess, this team, Gen.G is actually not even a Korean org, if people don't know. The argument is, like, Hanwha Life's right up there with the T1s. Like, that company has fucked on some money, right? If they really want to, they can make super teams, right?
Yeah, they're fucking massive. They are, like, one of the biggest companies in Korea. Just the Hanwha brand in general, and then Hanwha Life Insurance as well.
I was going to say, as an insurance company, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's their life insurance branch, and they have, like, 30 branches. Okay, it's like one of those companies, right? So they are gigantic, and they have very deep pockets as well. So it is.
Looks like they spent on this team, mate. What do you think of the squad, Brendan?
If they wanted to spend, they could, and I think they did. Like, especially the Viper staying and getting Peanut. Definitely in my mind, those would be like the two most expensive guys.
Yeah,
getting them peanuts, getting those pennies.
Yeah. Thorin, I don't know what to think, man. I'm very worried about his mental state after, especially Worlds and what happened with the Aatrox Flash and stuff. But he's strong, but he's not like he's a good like regular season player, but he's had some big ups and downs in his career. I'm very excited for Delight. We've all very highly rated Delight. I think that he's a really strong player, a great leader. Even when he was on Brion a couple of years ago, we were all like, okay, this guy is actually quite good towards the end of the year.
Evil hell.
Yeah. And he did. He got into Gen.G, and then now he's on Hanwha Life, and I think people are beginning to realize that he is a really, really strong player. And now he's going to get, I think, his best duo ever with Viper, right? So I think those two should be probably the main core of this roster. Top side of the map, I think that could be very volatile. Zeka, a little bit of like he's like a patch Zerg, he's good with certain champs, and if they're strong in that meta, then he can be really strong, but otherwise like a little bit shaky, kind of like forced to play Azir and stuff.
I will throw this out there right now. Akali supposedly could be quite strong. That's not a bad sign on the horizon.
Have to be permabanned against them.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Akali is not going to see the light of day in the LCK, because not only Zeka, but like Showmaker can play it, Faker can play it,
Chovy plays it,
Chovy can play it, obviously. Like, yeah,
top laners can all play it as well. It's a flex. Yeah. It's an actual legitimate flex in Korea. King can play Kali. So there's so much. But by the way, I actually think this is like the best roster construction in the LCK in years, because for me, all the players really make sense. Like, Thorin is a perennial, like, optimized for like side laning, like weak side like player.
Yes.
And the reason I respect Thorin is he lives up to my favorite adage: know thyself. Thorin never pretends to try and be something that he isn't. He fundamentally knows who he is as a player. He does have like a wavy year where there was a period in like summer last year where Thorin was actually elite. I actually thought he was one of the best top laners like in the world. He was playing so many of the matchups out so optimally. He was like playing better than Zeus for like large periods of the regular season. I thought he was great, but that's like Thorin of that period in time, and I've seen way much more of like Thorin of exactly. I've seen him at Worlds, but what's really interesting is you have potentially a lot of Zeka's picks actually pertain to side laning. You've got Thorin, who was great at side laning on Gen.G, and you have Peanut, who, I don't, like, put it this way, I've got, like, respect for Peanut, but I have, like, my doubts on him as, like, an individual, like, player, where, like, he's, like, frustrating in the sense of, I feel like people often accredit things that, like, Chovy was doing, and would just give, like, Peanut, like, the credit for, like, being there. I was like, and sometimes it was, like, good, but he does have, like, fundamental, like, problems, but I think he's going to be very, very good on this roster, because this roster is going to be able to just play around mid, around bot lane. They have an unbelievably strong bot lane. Viper was still a candidate for one of the best ADCs in the world last year. It wasn't on one of the best teams. Like, it's not like his, like, level just, like, dropped off. You've now gave him Delight, who was one of the best supports in Korea last year. So this is actually an amazing roster, and this is where roster upgrading the direction most LCK roster upgrading should go. You keep the strong fundamental players, and then you bring in like core for dismantling, and you take their strong fundamental players if it makes sense. And to me, not so much this team. Not so much this team will be, or like, it could be like beating T1. But if you told me at the end of the year this team was better than Gen.G across the average, I wouldn't be like utterly astounded. Like, I think that is entirely plausible. Like, it's not completely out of the question. So, I'm actually really excited to see this team. I think this team's going to be crazy, like sick to watching team fights and skirmishes. Zeka's like somewhat limited in terms of his like champion pool, but the thing is if you can actually get like Zeka to like the mid game, he's like I always say, it's like Korean Vithio, where I always thought fundamentally he takes such stupid risks in lanes for the champions that he's playing. But if you can get him to mid game and you can get him to team fight, in terms of mechanical prowess, skill shot accuracy, assassin execution play, he's like one of the best in the world, and has been since he played in like day one in like the LPL, where he was like a prodigy picked out of the pack by Coma. So there's a lot of depth of play, and he also doesn't get credit for stuff. Like, for example, like Valdes, I don't know, like Zoe isn't meta right now, but if Zoe just randomly becomes like meta, Zeka's one of the best Zoes in the world. He's like insanely good on like Zoe. During his tenure when he was in the LPL playing it, he was like up there with like Knight and Yagal in terms of like understanding of like terrain chokes and stuff. So there are like levels to like Zeka's play that you can't see. I always do get a bit concerned where someone's champion pool is like throttled by, just Poppy, like Zeka likes his dash champions. So I think where it goes. And Poppy's like quite good right now. So we'll see how this thing goes. Dandy's the coach as well, isn't it? Dandy coaching Peanut? That's crazy. So. What a world.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure he just received a suspension though.
Fair enough.
I digress.
I'm actually with you, though. What's funny is this was a team where, bizarrely, on some of the insight when we talked in the off-season, Monty's actually quite low on this because he obviously like hates on Zika and all them for like winning the fraudulent worlds. But my problem always has been this. It's like you say, Keire. It's like, look, here's the problem. All you have to do is just take that worlds out of the equation, and then you have an accurate view of Zika's career. He was a talent in the LCK. The joke is, if people don't know, not just because of style of play, but like the strengths and weaknesses. He's like the Korean leader, the player that we have from Norway who plays in the LEC, who just plays the Assassins and the Yorn and the Zed, but he doesn't want to play the Azir and the Orianna if he can. But the point is, people know, same thing in that team. The problem is, obviously, if you hit a meta where it's only Azir or Orianna, you're going to be in a bit of trouble. And then secondly, he has to get his picks as well. It's not just that he has to avoid the ones he's not as good. He has to get his picks. So if you ever see Zeke, like, it's not just the Carly guys. Like, his Yorn can be fucking monstrous. He's a sick player. And with you as well, Keire, in a way, you do have to sort of protect him a little bit. But you get him to these scenarios where these champions carry team fights and he's a fucking monster. Well, this is why I sort of agree as well, Keire. I have to be cynical with the players. But once I'm cynical, I think it fits together. Like, I'm with you on the Thorin one. The Thorin one also tells me, did you only watch Worlds? Because if you watched LCK, dude, this guy actually, I even said this, I would have, at the beginning of last year, I would have said, what's Thorin doing on this team? Like, get a better top laner in. Like, we're not going to win Worlds with this team. But when I actually saw him play, he did a really good job as like a gatekeeper top laner. Like, he did lose gracefully and let them play for mid and ADC. And by the way, until he got to Worlds, he didn't get beaten up. The joke is in the finals, he's one of the reasons everyone was hating on Zeus. Because this guy was actually just outplaying him. Like, he was looking fucking good. And everyone was saying, like, Zeus is supposed to be the best. Well, he should be. He probably should be the best Korean top laner. Then you go down, Peanut, for all of his flaws, one of the things, I agree they went too far with it. Chovey's definitely got some brain of his own, but he definitely did clearly play a role in, like, developing Chovey. Well, I'll tell you what, with a player like Zika, it's going to be difficult. You want the jungler to fucking be playing for that guy and have a whole game plan as to what he's going to do, how are we going to get him through lane, how are we going to get him ahead, how are we going to match all the ganks. Sounds great. Oh, also, here's the other angle, Keire. If you're worried about Poppy games, you can just fucking have Peanut pick it. You can just pick it. He's champion. There's an angle. And then I'll throw this in. Look, as much as I'll say, it's not as simple as like, oh, but everyone's going to ban him, so be fucked. Zika will have a hard time when people ban, but the good news is this. Every time you spend all your bans on his champions, you're going to get games where now Delight gets a Rakan. Now you get that Poppy for Peanut. You're going to get some actual good picks for other picks, so it can work out if the other players are good. And then you go to the bot lane. Mate, this is a steal. How have they made this fucking lineup? Like, one, I can't even believe Viper's still on the team. I really thought if you saw him play in LCK, it's just, because ADC is sort of like an ABC role, it's just the most obvious that, like, his main strength mechanic is fucking bonkers. Like, this guy, for real, I thought he was going to be on like Gen.G or fucking JD, you know, some like best team in the world for like $7 million. This guy is so cracked out. I think he's really, really good. And then who have you paired him with? Bro, I don't know what. This is the one move on Gen.G I don't get. I don't get the Lehen. That's why I asked if it's some sort of captain swap or so. Because player for player, if I take the nameplates off, I'm taking Delight over Lehens all day long, mate. Yeah. Delight was a fuck. Yeah. Here's the thing, because obviously, it, like, over the years as he got stronger, mate, by the time he hit summer onwards, he was just started. I even thought he was really good at Worlds, actually. He's one of the few players I don't play him. And it wasn't just when he picked Rakan, by the way. You can't make it as simple as that. Like, this guy just really did work. And again, think about this. What the area he was the best at? He was fucking sick in some of those team fights. Think about, I'm just imagining a world where Zika and Viper are just killing everyone while Rakan jumps on everyone in a team fight. That's like right there on paper, guys. Like, meanwhile, you've got a weak side tank top laner and then a jungler who just plays for the team, like, and plays champions like Poppy that just eliminate people from team fights. This actually looks, I agree with you, Keire, this is really good roster construction, actually. Yeah, it's not the 5 best players, but there's a world where if this team gets together, why can't they be like the second or third best team in LC? Why can't they be at Worlds? I think it's totally plausible. I'm actually, as much as I'm not a massive Zika fan, I'm looking forward to watching this team play. It looks like it should fit together. The joke is, they're sort of the opposite of the Gen.G one. The Gen.G one has the stronger players on paper, but how the fuck are they going to fit together? I feel like this is almost obvious. This team should have some sort of cohesion, you know. Feels like they picked the right types of players too.
Yeah, it's a good shout, especially because Peanut to me is such an intelligent player. He's one of those guys that, like, with age, kind of like Faker, I guess. Yeah. What people say about Faker is like what Peanut really does. Like, Faker does it to an extent, but Peanut really, like, tries to go into that style where he's like, he is the mastermind. He is the one telling all of his lanes what to do. And so he is like the perfect guy for both Thorin and Zeka, right? So it's like, you've got him to kind of control the solo lanes and like, okay, just don't do anything bad. I'm going bot. I'm going to dive and get Viper and Delight ahead. And then we're going to win. And you guys are going to be serviceable. You're going to split push. I think it is a really good shout. Like, in terms of like, which jungler out of all the junglers in the LCK would you like to have with Thorin and Zeka if they had to be paired together? Well, it would be Peanut, I think, actually. So, and it's really funny you were mentioning like Delight and how strong he is. When it comes to like, you know, we have to pick for all pro, we had to put in our votes. And I know it's a little bit of a meme, especially with the KT and what happened in summer. But for AD carry, it was so hard. It's like so difficult almost every year because it's like, you know, Viper's just so good. I remember I was here, I'm like, I really want to put Viper on my list. I think I eventually did at like 3rd or something, just because I know he's so fucking strong. But it's so difficult because you've got guys like, you know, Gumiusi on T1 because, you know, T1 is so strong. And then you look at KT Rolster, it's like, do we have to put like aiming on the list? You know, where does he fit in all this? He's quite good right now at the end of the season. Like, he's actually becoming more consistent. And then when it comes to support, it's like, okay, carry a Delight. It's like, okay, we all just like listed out like immediately.
All right, everyone had that list,
funny
right?
Because Keire, he's really strong. He's very, he's got like many different styles of play. Delight is like the perfect kind of engaged support and kind of like that old Mad Life style where you're just like, okay, I'm going to make these crazy plays. I'm going to be the star from the support role. And I feel like every year Delight's getting like a little bit closer, right? I think that Keire kind of brings in a lot of different styles, whereas Delight is a little bit more one-track minded, but he's so good at that one track that it's okay that, he can be very obviously the second best support in Korea. And, who knows in the next couple of years. I mean, he just keeps getting better. Every year I'm like, oh my God, Delight was already good. Now he's like so good. Yeah. How can he do this? How can he get this good? So I'm very excited for that bot lane. And as long as Peanut keeps it all together, I think this could be a really strong team. I would put them definitely third, even ahead of like KT Rolster and D+.
And by the way, listen, some of this might be Horpium, not even Corpium, Horpium. This is like hater Horpium, though. Are you ready? This is a new brand of Horpium. I've just designed it. You feel in control, right? Basically, here's the statement. Just record this timestamp, everyone. There's a world where this team could be better than T1. I said it. I put it out there. I manifested it into the universe. It's on my vision board. Had of my life. Fight Peanut. Better than Fake It. But by the way, there's another thing. That on this team as well, they actually have the maddest flex war of all time. Because if you are Zika and Viper, you can go, all right, Peanut, how you doing, mate? And then you've got the ring from Worlds on. But then Peanut can just go like, how are you doing, mate, Zika? Like 6 fucking rings from LCK. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We've got both sides, mate. Who knows which is better on these two? Because there's the other thing about this team. Dude, everyone's been some form of champion in this team. I think people are actually low-key underrating this roster. It's actually quite interesting. Yeah, I think it's a bagger on paper, mate. I can't believe I actually did just imply, though, that like a Zika team will be like number one. We'll see on that one. We'll see. Wait and see on that one. We'll see. Even I had to rein myself in. Quick one.
Do you think Korea was better than Delight in summer?
Brendan, I think you mean you.
But in summer just there, where like Faker came out of the roster and everyone looked like they had disconnected their hands and brain, and the only human being on the team was like Guma for 3 months. Because I'm sorry, I love Korea. I think he was amazing. I very rarely say supports are the best players in the world, but at the start of last year, Korea for me was like the best player in the world. But I couldn't even with like my belovement, I couldn't say Delight was worse than him. A lot of people talked about Delight being like narrow in the same way they I just like plays Rakan, and the same way they talk about missing in the LPL, they like talk about like this like narrowness. It's like, yeah, it's okay if you only know one punch as long as it knocks a guy out. But I've never understood that less criticism. And another one for Delight and like missing are people who are these Rakan and engaged specialists, right? Because they get Rakan, it's like, what are they to do? Like, not play it? That's like saying to like any good ADC, like when don't play the best thing. It's like so silly to talk in like those terms. It's because Korea found this other avenue to be successful, right? But just because you find a different avenue to be successful, if the other guy goes the main way and is still successful, just because yours is unique, you get like credit for doing it unique, but it's what you do for your team in the game. And Delight is like, of any even Korean player, he has some of the best sense for the snapping gauge, where he'll like pick someone out of position, or the enemy team are like out of their timing, where they wouldn't be able to like group in time, and he'll like stagger their pre-objective setup. He is like so good at that. It's like Halisang's from 2018 and like Ming from 2018 level. He reminds me a lot of like really, really good LPL and European Rakan players, more than the very controlled Korean style. And I think it's actually going to suit this team super, super well, because on the unbeknownst note is Viper is actually mega aggressive. Even though because he makes so few mechanical errors, people often put him in the wheelhouse of the safer players like Deft and stuff. Okay. Where I don't know, I think most people just don't actually watch him play. He's unbelievably aggressive. Viper is almost comically so.
Dude, it's why I actually think low-key, he's one of the only Korean players ever, I think, since he didn't get on T1. It's the mistake he came back to Korea. Dude, he should have stayed in the LPL. That was the perfect region for him. Yeah. They fucking loved his style of play, mate. They just played for it. It was amazing.
Yeah, and that's what I remember at the time when we were talking about Leave. It's Leave was replacing Viper. That was the joke. It's it's impossible, because Player can fundamentally do it. Like, even like, and this, as a talking point, people are not going to want to hear because of the year. If you told me EDG had gotten Ruler for Viper, I would have told you it's more likely a mistake than not. Even though Ruler went on to have like a fantastic career, because it's how well like Viper like suits the environment of his like team, and it's like Viper and almost every one of his team is like a bus driver. He is the vehicle in which the team will win the game, and he will give you unbelievably high percentage chances to win the game. I have almost never seen him like let a game just like peter out and like be lost without him attempting to win it. He really doesn't like care about like KDA and stuff like that. He does give his team the best chance of winning. The only thing that scares me is, are they in the opening meta? We don't know how the rest of the year is going to go. Him and Delight getting these double ranged combos executed into them, because they're scary as fuck. And you better believe like either Peanut is going to cover those dives, you know what I mean, and is going to be like aware of them, and and he's going to give them the breathing space, or they're going to have to like start playing them themselves and find like a new dynamic, because they are very, very potent in my opinion, and they're very, very, they're like game shifting. Like how much of a gold lead they can create is like game warping large. So I'll be interested to see it go, but I'm super high on this team.
Right, obviously we'll do the D+ one now, because that's one of the... Here's what's funny, because there's the Lucid angle that I know Brendan actually was one of the people even posted on Twitter about. There is actually more hope than you think, but I know a lot of people are really down on this roster, because this is the one where they got King in. They brought up Lucid, who was their player from other lower divisions. They kept Showmaker. They got Aiming from KT, and then they kept Kellen for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe he's best friends with D+, or I don't fucking know on that one. So obviously the problem with this roster, Brendan, immediately is this. People don't know Lucid if they're not watching challenges, obviously, or Emma or whatever. And then people just feel like, oh, Showmaker without Canyon, and, you know, maybe he should have left or gone to one of these other maybe he should have been on Handwear or something. Maybe people want a move like that, you know. So I feel like a lot of people are really down on this D+ roster. Where are you at on this one?
I mean, I wouldn't put them in the top 3 still. I do think that like T1 Gen.G, Hama Life are still above them in my mind. But I would say that, you know, as you're mentioning, everybody's expectations are very low, especially if you don't watch, you know, everything and you don't see everything. And maybe you watch like a couple of games of Kingen and Kellen and Summer and you're like,
yes.
Really? Like, why? Like, why? What? You know? Aiming, as we were talking about, he does have the ability, and I think he is learning to become more, actually more consistent, which is a good sign. I think he is on the up and up. Definitely worried about Showmaker. I don't, you know, from year to year, it's hard to say like where his wrist is at, where his mind is at, you know. But apparently, I watched an interview where he was like, you know, I was even thinking about retiring. I'm not really sure what I want to do, but
not a good sign.
I decided to stay on. I decided to continue on, and for my fans, you know, as you would say.
I love it. He's not you know, like the hundreds of thousands of dollars you get that year if you sign the deal. No, for the fans, of course, for the fans.
Yeah.
Everything for you guys.
So you know, he's. You know what's interesting for Showmaker as well is that his stream is actually getting bigger and bigger. It's actually really fun to watch, even if you don't speak Korean. He
it's funny.
English as well. He's a lot of fun. He's actually like a very natural like streaming personality. So I think he's got like a good career.
I saw those clips when he was like memeing about the certain champions that were like the worst. I didn't know he was like he's actually like known as like a charismatic figure with like good personality. Right? Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. No, he's because
if people don't know, it's super famous that people who are the best Korean players just like stream, don't talk, sometimes don't even have the camera on, and it's like, I mean, okay, but I could be watching Raw PGG game now, like what is this, you know? That's cool if he's got a personality though. Okay,
they've gotten much better, I think, Korean streamers across the board, but Showmaker definitely like stands out above and beyond the others. And then of course Lucid, like this guy is absolutely cracked. Like he should have been in LCK a while ago. I don't really know why not, but finally D+ were like, I guess we're losing Canyon, let's get our cheap challenger jungler. Oh, it's Lucid. Okay, like finally someone realized, okay, maybe this guy should be on a roster for one reason or another.
Is it age Valdes? Because he's only just turned 18.
Yeah, well,
I think it was his age.
That's probably like part of it as well, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Right. Okay.
But there was like a good year where somebody maybe could have like put him in. But either way, this guy is probably going to be the best player on the roster. Like, I think that even better than Showmaker.
I mean, he is like a full-on sort of like, if you want a jungle star, he's everything you'd want it to be, right? Like, it's going to play the Lee Sin and the fucking, all the Viego, all the carry champs, right?
Yeah, he will carry. He is a carry jungler. I think that Canyon kind of adopted that style in 2023 especially, but Lucid is like, he's just one of those guys. He will carry your game, and he's not going to be like kind of inconsistent like Canyon was in the last year. And Canyon, don't get me wrong, amazing player.
Sure.
Lucid, I think, has a ton of promise. Like all of us are super excited to watch him play in the LCK because I think he's just going to make a lot of junglers look silly in the 1v1 matchup, and he's going to carry a lot of games. Now, obviously, all the parts aren't quite there, but definitely looking at Lucid as like the main guy for this roster.
Don't ask him to set an objective up.
By the way, though, here's the thing, though. Before we go in, because there will be definitely some criticism, I just have to ask though. All you said about Kellen and Kingen was just like people thought they weren't that good. Like, what do you think about Kingen and Kellen though? That's the $1 million question, Valdes. What do you think of that?
Oh yeah, sure. I do think that Kellen has had a couple of good Renata games, and I think 2022 was where he was really good, or decent. But 2023 was definitely a big flop for him. I think he was definitely a big part of the reason why D+ just lost a lot of...
Put it this way, he was every Deft fan's main villain as far as I can tell. Like, they hate this guy.
For a good reason. I mean, he did not have a good year. He was pretty abysmal, especially towards the end. I don't know what happened to him.
Something happened at Worlds. He went really bad, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, he's a very introverted guy, but he's like extremely nice. But sometimes, when it comes to like that extreme fierce competition, sometimes maybe you can get overwhelmed with a personality like that. I'm not sure. I know that he has it in him. He is a good player. That is why he stays on these rosters, because the stuff we don't see of like the scrims or like when there's not a lot of pressure, and he's probably friends with a lot of the players and maybe even the org. So they're like, okay, we'll give you another chance. You're good, We'll give you a little pay cut. That wasn't a great year, and we'll keep you on.
Okay.
So none of us are high on Kellen. None of us think he's a great player right now. Especially he has had some good years. And
where do you go on the Kingdom one then? Because I always think the problem is this is another player who, but people forget this dude. He was the MVP of the Final of Worlds. Like, I can't even lie. By the way, when I watch the series back, it is like watching one of those. It is like watching like one of those like UFC fights where that like it's an upset at the end, and you think, I think the guy still wins. I think he's still going to win this, even though he gets upset. But like, if I watch that series at the end, I can't lie. He did do awesome. He did subdue Zeus completely. Like, but what do people in Korea think of him? Did he also get sort of like a weird Beryl status where people don't know if he's good or not? Do people actually acknowledge that he's like a world champion and stuff?
I think they do, but I would say that he's one of the less popular top laners in the LCK. Like, not a lot of people rate him very highly or like are big fans of him. But they just see him as a consistent guy. Unfortunately for us, we're like, well, he was that consistent guy until summer, and then he was just kind of invisible, and that's different from consistent. Where consistent is like, okay, you're always making some kind of impact. Invisible is like you're just not even there. Like, you're consistently not making an impact. So we are not very high on him either. He began, I think 2023 it was, where he had like some crazy Ornn like TikTok highlights, and everybody's like, holy shit, like King, and he's here to play in this year again. And then
I love it.
That was his
TikTok highlights.
Yeah, no, it was.
I love it.
That was his peak, and then after that, it was like a slow...
Just getting the Zoomers on board with his agenda early with his TikTok highlights.
Yeah. The meme was, it was like, it was Chinese League of Legends TikTok or King and Outplay, and it was like the whole idea was like you couldn't tell the difference between if it was being set up like a show thing or like a fake King and.
If you don't know, Keire's referring to they used to do this in Counter Strike. They'll actually set up a fake highlight basically where everyone agrees that you jump here and then I do so you can make these amazing combos. But he was actually doing like that level of play. Right, fair play then, fair play. Okay,
they were really, really funny.
Okay.
So everybody knows he's capable, but it's been a very slow, steady decline for him. So again, expectations are very low. I would say people are like, hopefully he returns to his consistent form and like maybe carries from time to time. But I do worry because he has to play weak side, I would imagine, with Lucid and Showmaker. Like, I don't think Lucid's going to be going top anytime soon because King is just going to play the tank. He's going to play the Ornn, and Lucid's going to go mid or bot. And I think that's the way this team is going to function. So
Basically, for me, I actually just think this team's like the sleeper team, because I think people will just dismiss it because of the Canyon move and they don't know Lucid. But like everything I've heard makes it sound like not only is he a really good player, might be the perfect player to bring in as well to replace Canyon in a team where we don't have a super strong top lane. Like, let's get the fucking stud jungler. And Showmaker knows how to play with the fucking jungler. That's the one thing I do know in his career. So that's nailed it. And then, as I've said before, I've always actually been slightly higher on aiming than other people. I understand he does have what is my biggest pet peeve for ADCs, because you just die indiscriminately and throw the whole game. He has done that, but I'll give him credit. Like I say, I've seen him put some games on his back in KT Rolster and just win them like the Nightmare Fuel ADC game you get where it's just you and no one's peeling for you and you just have to like dodge every skill shot and do every fucking piece of DPS. Like, this guy will go in. He'll seriously play like to the limit if he has to. So I don't think this is as bad as people think, actually. I think this is potentially a playoff team. Like, they're on the outskirts, but they could maybe upset people. We'll see. Come on, Keire. Where you on the whole team, though, not just the players? Where you on the whole team?
No, so this team has to become like Lucid's team in the future. Like, this has to become like a Lucid based team for it to be successful. I actually think it's it's not bad. Like, Kellen's the worst player on the team, and he could be good. The thing is, I don't think the team's like bad, like per se in any sense of the word. I don't think all the PCs are like as optimal as they could be, but this is a team that should be like in the middling section and trying to like break out and snipe wins off of like the elite teams based on if like they're really good players like Showmaker and Lucid can like show up on like specific days. A little bit because of the terrain changes, mid jungle 2v2 has become less lane based and more invasion based, but that's not entirely like the case. For example, you can still like abuse LeBlanc Lee Sin. And because of the isolated nature, and they both have like insane terrain scaling, they aren't as affected as much by the map, and as such, they can get on top of people easier than other champions. And so, there's lots and lots of places they can go. Syndra still very potent on the 1-2 item power spike. There's a lot here that I actually like. Lucid is just like a straight up jungle prodigy. Hopefully he can transfer his skills to tier 1. I've seen it way too many times from LCK challengers and way too many times from LDL where people who are gods in one arena can't transfer their skills to the other, and so I don't actually give the gravitas of it definitely will happen. But Lucid's good, very good. Aiming is basically just creating Karze. But he's
that's a good shout.
Yeah, he'll win you he'll win you some unwinnable games, and then he'll just sometimes questionably lose you them. But the losing you angle over the course of their career has happened less and less and less. So yeah, I think one of the things that you're going to need to be really careful on this team is drafting allocations on where to go. And what team structure and team shape is going to look like, who's going to set up objectives, who's going to be playing on front line and flank. So we're going to have to internally come up with a lot of decisions. So I kind of good. I do enjoy though the fact of where Showmaker's mental is at. Did you see that, Valdes? When the European streamers went over to Korea, yes. Showmaker recognised one of them who had ran him down when he was in EU, and he just and the dude's name wasn't even
wasn't some famous person or something, right?
Yeah, but the dude's name wasn't even remotely correct. He figured him out from his pet.
Holy shit.
He's show me.
This guy must have an insane memory. Fucking hell.
No, in insane memory, I think he's deeply unwell sometimes. And Showmaker was just I remember it, and instantly Pseudo didn't play well. The turret dive didn't go good. Right. I am now 0-3 in lane. So he's still got some of these old tendencies in him. The thing is, at the end of the day, I don't know. This team will, in my opinion, will not be contesting for LCK. But in terms of the progression of the core of the team, and people like Lucid, it should be super interesting. You should basically just watch this team to see what happens with Lucid. It should be mega fun.
Pretty much. And draft for mid jungle every game.
Every game, yeah. Every single game.
If they start drafting for bot,
no aiming picks. I don't want to see it. No.
Yeah. With some of these other teams, we'll just do we don't have to do a whole set. We'll just do thoughts on them and then we'll keep going, right? So for the DRX squad, if people don't know, this looks like they just went budget because they just brought a bunch of their challengers players up basically. So what they did was they only kept Rajcula. It was obviously always been serviceable. And then the jungler, Sponge, the mid laner, Setab, and Playeta, the support, were all basically in their org anyway. And then they brought Teddy over from Sandbox. So obviously most people, if you don't watch LCK, and especially LCK Challenge, you can have no chance on this team at all. It's just like, no, I don't know these names except Teddy and Rajcula, basically. So, Brendan, give me your thoughts on this one.
I mean, it's kind of hard to say. As we go through every team, we're going to get to some of the weaker ones. I would say that Rajcula might be able to, do a bit better in this meta where a lot of the changes are happening. But he's also been a player that I think has been maybe the most tilted player I've ever seen. Like for many years in a row, where he's like, I'm doing stuff and I'm the solo kill king, and my team still loses, and I don't even make playoffs because I got 7th place. That's happened to Rajcula many a time. So I don't even know where his mental is at. That guy has transcended into the stratosphere. Maybe
Nirvana.
Do something. Yeah, maybe he can do something with that somehow. The rest of the players, I think Teddy, he has a big name. Again, he played on T1. He was good. I don't think he's currently in good form unless he turns something on for this year. I don't really see that changing. Pleta, Setab, and Sponge, I think they were like pretty good, quite good for challengers, but they don't quite meet the same criteria of like a Lucid or a Thanatos or some of these other challenger tier players. I think Setab and Pleta came up and played in the LCK during like the COVID year, like the one really bad one where there was like a lot of challengers, and they actually like won a game. So maybe they can like utilize that. Setab is pretty good. He's pretty good, but again, I don't think that like
looks like he's 4 years old.
He does. And Rajcula alone will be able to do much. Pleta and Sponge are definitely serviceable. I'd probably put them at like 6th or 7th. So.
See, I was laughing at you, but I did look at the Wikipedia, and we'll just say, okay, you nailed that one. Keep going. What do you think? Do you have any more thoughts? Do you have any thoughts then, Keire, on this lineup?
Basically, I think setup could be good. Rajcula's like the old man of he needs to be like a leader. He needs to be a veteran. He needs to be consistent for this team. He needs to give this team, these rookies, like a platform to move on from. Is Rajcula known for that? Who knows? He might just run them down to teach them a lesson. I don't know. Oh, I've been into it. It's time for you to learn the iron way, the fucking chain and hammer type shit. I'm actually a lot higher on Sponge. Sponge is a really, really, really good Leafs in kind of carry player, but he was often relegated to things like Sejuani, where he's not as prodigious or as flashy as Lucid. But I would say he was maybe more responsible for it's gonna sound like a death, but he was more responsible for doing normal jungle things objective setups, control stuff like that, where Lucid is more of a bona fide carry. If you catch my drift. Setab, that's what I'm saying. It looks like he's 4. The LPL get stick for lying about people's ages and that. I think the LCK are up to fucking nonsense too. This is an absolute joke, but he's fine. It's a big jump. I will say to him, Setab will be the 8th best or the 7th best mid laner in the LCK, and that sounds really, really bad until you realise every single person above him makes sense. So there's not a lot that you can do. Teddy's fine. What can you do? He probably should still be in the LCK at some level, but he's not the insane hard carry player he once was. And Platea, I had a note for Platea and it basically says mid. And that's not his position. That's that's just what I think of him. So
you nailed it. There you go. Yeah. By the way, there's only a few things to say. One, without opening the can of worms, on that whole thing of sometimes Korean and Chinese players look way younger. Obviously they do, and I'm definitely with you, Keire. But I will just say there are people that is just the way it is in life. I'll give you an example. You'll know him from Counter-Strike, but Brendan can look it up if he wants. There's a player from Counter-Strike who is actually retired. He's a coach now. He's called Exist. He used to play for NIP, and it's spelled XIZT. This guy's in his 30s, by the way. Just go look at that picture, and all I'll tell you is some people just look he looks like he's 14 still, doesn't he? He just has that look. Some people just have that look. So I will say it's not impossible. Some people are just unicorns like that. And then on this team, here's the problem, is there's only 2 angles on this team since I don't really know the challenger players, which is let's at least see some solo kills with Renekton and Jack Stop from Rajcula. There's one, I can guarantee that. And then 2 is, even though in my heart of hearts, I know that Teddy isn't the stud he was on Gen.G and when he was first on T1. I know he isn't in my heart of hearts, but I will always, because of his style of play, I do love that ADC. I know it's an old school style, but I do love that ADC style of play where you just play that actual safe, get through the lane, get to the team fight, carry the team fight properly, do all the damage, everyone peel for me. So in some sense, no matter what, Teddy, I will always see Teddy on any roster. It'll be like, near, far, wherever. I'll hold that candle. I mean, I don't believe it anymore. I've seen too much of Gumayusi, but I even used to be the hater who was sometimes like, when Gumayusi, it was like, get Teddy in there. Let Teddy fucking play. I used to be one of those idiots, don't worry. I know now, like, look, I'll give it up now. Gumayusi's better, but essentially, like, I do think, unfortunately, like, considering his career, Teddy's name, actually, it's not as big as it really probably should be. He actually had a pretty good career if you look at it. And people just don't know. Those Gen.G teams were miserable that he was on. He was really good on those squads. And his problem really is he just walked into sort of the wrong era of T1. That was the era when they didn't win Worlds and when they could win LCK, but people, unless you watch LCK, you wouldn't know he's good. So yeah, I'll just be interested to watch him play. I have no clue what this is. By the way, the thing is, like I said at the setup, I don't really blame too much on the roster. People have to understand when DRX won Worlds, there's a reason. I mean, not only that the team wasn't that good, but there's a reason they didn't just get to do a T1 and sign all the players again. They're not a giant org in that way, guys. And so the idea that, like, in esports winter, I mean, you've heard about all the stuff Arnold from Gen.G said. Korea's feeling esports winter too. It's understandable that if you had to make, like, especially the first split, if you're going to go with a cheaper roster, this is how you do it. This is how you don't have to pay money. You don't have to do buyouts. You don't have to do massive signings. You might not be good, but you can see for now they're just willing to chill. It looks like this is a rebuilding year, as you say, right?
And you know what? D Plus could have done the same thing with Thanatos in the top lane, but instead being the king.
King steals another job.
Definitely much more expensive. But I don't know. I guess D Plus had them and they thought Kingham would be better.
To put some respect on Teddy's name, on teams that Teddy's on, when he's playing ADC, he's usually either the best or candidate for the best player. When he was on T1, right, that was like the first time ever the best player on the team was a bot laner. And it was like one of the only times like he was the best player on T1 for that like whole year. And, you know, they tried to get it over the line, but it was more unfortunate. And he's not the player he once was, but, you know, I want to see like Teddy do well.
His problem is that was the year. He was the one that lost in the year when they lost to G2 a bunch of times. Yeah. So the problem is, if you're Korean, you have to understand, guys. To us, we know G2 was the one like truly great Western team that was actually at the level of the. But if you're Korean, you're never supposed to ever lose best of fives to where they're going to automatically think you're bad. And that's like the joke is that's like instant fucking truck speed dial the second you lose to a Western team. Like. And on top of that, by the way, remember they all, because of that Showmaker thing, used to all fucking hate Perks being cocky, and then he was like the role swapped AD beat, and you're like, I can't even imagine how much they must have been tilted by losing those series. Like, shit talking, and it's a role swap, Western player to AD, and he's beating your greatest team of all time. Like, I can't even imagine that. The truck meta back then must have been out of control. Right, let's do some of the other teams then. So as we talked about earlier, Brendan, obviously, one of the orgs that I think in Korea, Westerners have no clue about, it has to be the Nongshim team. Right? Because the problem with this squad was, if you remember a few years back, Peanut was the MVP when he was on this team back, and they had that one lineup that was like half decent, that was good, right? But people don't know that was it. That was like the one brief moment in time. Nongshim was like relevant, had some good players, maybe the good. So ever since that, they are just a bottom feeder, like permanently. It feels like. What about this roster? Should this roster also be one that has issues? You think?
Yeah, I mean, of course. Like Nongshim, you were talking about esports winner. After that Peanut year that was like quite good, they were like, all right, let's bring up our entire challengers roster and let's just put them in the LCK and let's see what happens. To their credit, again, I think they got 9th. I think it wasn't 10th. It might have been 10th. But it was like 9th or 10th. And these guys just weren't ready, right? So they spent an entire year basically just kind of getting great practice, I guess, if you frame it in a good light, on the stage, but they were getting wrecked a lot of the time.
True.
I thought you were going to say getting fisted there, but you put on that's nicer terms, getting good practice.
Yeah.
There you go.
You know, to frame it in a good light. But, you know, individually, nobody really stands out in this roster. And I think that's why they're very lovable, right? A lot of young kids, they kind of have like the teamwork makes the dream work kind of attitude. Everybody know what they got themselves into. They didn't expect to have a lot of success, and so they're just kind of enjoying their time. Fiesta was the one guy that was kind of like, I think they played with subbing him out a couple of times. I can't even remember off the top of my head who the guy.
Call me is the other guy that they're trying to play.
Call me.
Fucking, don't pick up the phone if that guy fucking tries to get you.
Call me is pretty good. Call me is pretty good, but. You know, the roster itself, I don't know. Jiwoo was doing some crazy stuff with Neela, like he was famous for that in Challengers, and then he brought into LCK, and like there were a couple of games where people were like, oh crap, this guy's actually pretty good. But other than that, you don't really have much going on, to be honest. And Yeah. Again, it comes down to the level of play in the LCK. Like, these guys just weren't ready, and
yes,
maybe that 1 year helps them get to a better stage, and maybe Ju and Calmy can do some carrying. But
I'll just throw this out there. All I'll say on this team, because I don't know a lot of the players, obviously, is this is one where I just assume the org just goes with budget rosters. Because again, Nongshim is, if you don't know, if you've ever eaten that Shim ramen spicy noodles that everyone's had, just look at the pack that is Nongshim. If you don't, it's the most famous like brand of all time. The joke is these are the fucking noodles that all the players who are Korean take when they go to like Worlds in the West or MSI, and they just have it. If you don't know, but I used to be on a team where I actually went with Korean StarCraft players. Like, the joke is when you share a room with them, they open their suitcase and half the suitcase is like a thing of kimchi, like 50 things of fucking ramen. And because the idea is, I've often pointed this out, it's actually an unknown thing to some Westerners about Koreans. One of the reasons they do that is so that they have the exact same food that they know they have from home when they play the tournament. It's actually genius, by the way, low key, because when we used to do the circuit like in StarCraft and stuff, I can tell you there'd be some like amazing Swedish or Norwegian player, but because the tournament's in like Dallas, he's just eating like barbecue or like a fucking massive burger before the game. And I'm like, bro, that's gonna wreck you. Like, the guy who just had the noodles, he's gonna be fucking, it's a normal day for him. Like, that's so actually low key. Like, that's why actually that's all I know about Nongshim, mate. I don't fuck all. Like I say, I liked them when the peanut roster was there, but this just looks like you're just trying to survive in the LCK. You're just trying to keep your team alive. Keire, come on, where you at on this one?
There is hope, right? You've touched on it slightly. If you took, right, the bot lane of Jaiwu and Peter, okay, and you stuck them with OK Brian's top side of Karis, Gideon and Morgan, that's another good team.
Okay.
But the problem is they've got the problem is they're stuck with 3 people who are like terrible. So that this team's not good. Unless they manage to like through the power of fucking like friendship or something. I don't know, and I don't believe in the power of friendship.
Is this the worst team, Keire? Is this the worst team in LCK?
Oh, like yeah, it's either them or the Kondu freaks. But I don't know. It's like I would say it's like diarrhea and constipation. They're both still shit at the end of the day. Like,
well, I did warn you, Valdes. I did warn you for this episode before we came on, mate. Listen,
like I don't. It's like both of them are terrible to have, and then at the end of the day, we're still talking about shit. So like,
fair enough.
I can't decide. Like, another bot lane's decent. Like, the bot lane shouldn't be on the team. Like, the bot lane's LCK caliber. They should be able to be. They're like they should be kept as like a package and adopted and absorbed into someone else's team who needs a bot lane. The rest of the players, I don't know. I can't be convinced.
Okay.
Brendan, he won Challengers finals by going 0-6 on Jax and split pushing.
Okay. So, he's a true solo queue top laner then. Okay.
Yeah, the individual skill level of some of these players, not great. Calmy and Ju, pretty good. Pretty decent, Other than that, I mean, I don't really rate Peter. I used to love him. He's very charismatic. He's a great guy, but yeah, over the years he hasn't really improved all too much in my mind. So I think Ju kind of carries that lane. But either way, like, they are going to have to play through a couple of those guys. Otherwise, they're just going to be 10th, I would say. I would even rate Kwangdong ahead of them at this point.
Let's do the Kwangdong one then, because obviously the Kwangdong one is weird because they just kept the same team but added Cos from KT, which is like, what? So, and also I will throw this out there if people don't know, but Kwangdong is obviously the team that has CV Max, the famous one who did Griffin and DRX after that and found loads and loads of players, Kanavi, all these Pure Shake, Chovy, Viper, all those players. He is their coach, so that's always an interesting angle. But it seems like you two disagree. You actually think this could be a decent team, Valdes?
For me, starting from the top, Dudu actually, besides his name, he was actually pretty good for the beginning of summer, I would say. I think there was like a good 3 or 4 weeks, maybe even a little bit more, where you're like, hey, Dudu's like pretty good. He's taking some good 1v1s. He's taking down top players. He has the ability. He is getting better. I think towards the end of the split, it was like, oh, well, my team kind of sucks, so I'm not really playing to the same level. Because he's always very consistent. He's not really the carry guy. He's very strong, though, so that's a good addition. But to me, the big thing that stands out is their bottom lane. It's by far the worst in the LCK, I would say. Like, and it's not even close. Well, actually, wait. I'm gonna take that back. Ambient effort also.
Yeah, ambient effort. That's
but I think it's going to be an interesting fight between those two bot lanes to see which one will be 9th and which will be 10th. because to me, Toon just I don't rate him at all. Like he's
literally a bad ADC. Yeah.
He was trying to play Kaisa and he was like ulting into 5 people by himself, trying to like engage on team fights. I don't know if it was tilt or if it was just a lack of awareness or something. And then Andil isn't good either, so that doesn't really.
Yeah, that gives you no hope either. Yeah.
So Bulldog always had like a lot of potential. He was one of those guys from Challenger where we're like, hey, he's quite good. He can actually get something going. But yeah, over the years, I say years, over the year and a little bit has kind of stagnated and don't really know what to expect from him. Like he has the hands, but hasn't.
He's their franchise player, isn't he? He's like Bulldog is the Freaks like franchise player. The problem is like Bulldog at least is someone who could possibly be good like one day. Like Tongyun, I remember I said this. Like Tongyun is like a good Jinx player for all the wrong reasons. In terms of like when he plays like Jinx, he's as far back as he can possibly be, and like shooting you from the Galapagos Islands, but never picking like the good target to shoot at. Always just like stat padding, killing threats that are never going to actually like kill him or his like teammates, right? And then when he plays Kaisa, he turns into like some sort of like, I don't know, like suicide bomber wannabe that just flies into the back of like teams and just throws away thousands of goals. Right. Like, I just don't know what's wrong with it. Like, there's no middle ground. Like, he's frustrating to watch. He's not like LCK caliber. Like, then you've got the 2 junglers. Like, do you think anything of Gen.G? Do you think he's going to get played? I don't think. Like,
no,
thank. There we go. We can move on from that one. And then here's the problem with like Dudu. Dudu's another guy that lost his job to Kingen. This guy literally just like goes around just taking everyone's like jobs off them. But the thing is like Dudu's fine. Dudu should be in the LCK. He has like upside. He has like defined like strengths and weaknesses that you can actually like talk about and build a team around. I just don't think a team has been built around him. I think this is just arbitrary like madness. Until this bot lane's removed, this. I don't know where you can move from here because you'll just lose so many games.
I do know that Toon and CV Max have like a pretty good relationship. Like they're quite close. So I think CV Max is really trying to be like, you have the potential. You can do it. And there's a lot of pressure on Toon. And I think we've kind of seen that over the last split, especially where some days he had some okay moments, but most of the time he just looked very nervous and just kind of like doing crazy things that didn't make any sense and just kind of losing his mind. So maybe this is the last year for Toon. Maybe CV Max is like, okay, I'll give you one last chance and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, for me, I don't want to see anymore.
By the way, on this angle, I feel like there's an angle maybe Westerners won't understand, which is, look, aside from he was unfortunately embroiled with that famous scandal with Griffin Sword and getting sued by him and stuff. So obviously that wasn't great because it is like an honour-based culture. And if people make allegations, it's pretty bad for your career and what people think of you. But actually, the other reason, in my opinion, why if you look at CV Max, he never gets like the top rosters. It's always like, I mean, people forget the joke is DRX later won Worlds without him. But when he joined DRX, they were nobody. He was just like building that squad from the ground up and getting these pieces I'm talking about. He was scouting some of the players. Yeah, he got people like Chovy, his old mate, and he got Deft in. But aside from that, he was I mean, the joke is, everyone flamed him at the time for Morgan. Morgan actually became half decent later. Like, he was actually not that bad in the past years. Like, but it just wasn't under him. So I've always got the vibe. If people don't know, the reason why Reapered coached so much in the West, but not in Korea, is because actually in Korea, they don't really like you to be like a maverick a coach. Like, they don't want you to be the guy who's sort of like, oh, I've got all my own ideas. They want like a structure and an approach and also playing to the meta. And so I get the sense in CV Max's career, he has to go to these smaller orgs because that's where they give him the control over the roster and they let him experiment and he brings up the people he wants. And in this case, he's chosen to stay with basically the same team. Like, I'm actually quite interested in that regard as to how they'll do, because at the end of the day, it's another set of players he's already coached. He's going to get to coach them for another year. The problem I have with that basically is, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good a coach you are. Like, the players play the game. So you could be the most genius coach ever. If you don't have the actual pieces in the game, you can't win, especially not in LCK. But I'll always be interested to see what's going on. Like, if a player develops to be decent, like the Dudu guy actually was pretty good last year. He had some games that definitely were. The problem he has, obviously, is the name, like you said, just as a Westerner, people are going to meme on it. But all you need to know is eventually, when he escapes that meme, you'll know he became a legit good player. This team should be near the bottom, though, for sure.
Isn't CV Max suspended again and fined? I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. Like the opening games of the LCK, he's not allowed to coach like the first week or like 2 weeks or something. Like, because a bunch of them all got clipped with it because they done at the start of the year. Korea does like checks on everyone's behaviors and they hand out a bunch of suspensions. And he was one of the people that got like caught. I think it's either one full week or one game. I can't remember, so I won't like put it to it. But anyway, I digress.
Fair enough.
I think CD Max is actually like pretty legit. He has actually a coherent like vision on like the game when he's like people have translated what he talks. You know what I mean? Like it makes sense. He obviously has some level of eye for talent. I just think he's with a dead end squad. I don't think this can really go anywhere. With a different team or a different group of players, there could be something.
Okay, so if people don't know, they basically changed everyone but the mid laner in Brion. And the reason why that is a problem is because here's the sad thing, Brendan. If they'd have kept the same team, we could have had a great convo now about how Brion never really was as bad as people thought. There's a reason why, for example, Monty, when Faker was out, predicted they would beat T1. Like, they had like qualities in their game. There was moments in games where they actually would look good and they'd just throw the game inexplicably. The problem is, it's not that lineup at all. Like, this is basically like a brand new squad. Like, they've got Morgan at top lane, Gideon support, jungle rather. They kept Karis as the mid laner, and then the bot lane is Envy and Effort, and as aforementioned, Effort obviously of T1, which is apparently like his full name actually now is I am Effort. I used to formerly of T1. That's just like that's on the business card even at this point in time. You know, like the Patrick Bateman, like born off coloured. You know, like whatever. You get the meme. Like, so what do you think of this roster, Brendan? What about this year's Brion? Is this really the time when Brion's the worst team?
I don't think any of us are very high on this roster at all. I think that Effort has had struggle years, even when he was with T1. I mean, as we joke, the name brand has kind of gotten him for a very long way. Envy was probably the most confusing pickup, I think. Maybe besides Gideon. Gideon also, like, this team had a couple of the two most confusing because Gideon and Envy just are players that have not really done anything in Korea, and they have been around for like a decent while. Gideon a little bit less, but they're kind of like tried and true players that haven't achieved much or haven't been able to, reach a potential that you might see in scrims or whatever. So to find them both on the same team just kind of leaves me questioning, especially because then you look in the mid lane, which is Karis, and it's basically Bulldog, but just like 2 years ahead, where it's like started off with a lot of hype, was very good in challengers, and then there was just a slow decline and kind of just, hasn't really achieved much yet. And Karis, another one of these players that I think struggles with kind of like mentality coming into games because oftentimes looks very nervous. Like, he has the ability, but he just can't achieve it for some reason. Morgan, Atlas loves him. Lord Morgan, the memes are there. We all love him and OK Brion, Giga Chad, but I do think that
it is. That's the real problem.
Very confusing pickups.
The only downside is, look, they've done a great job developing some excellent meme quality material, but like, you got to do some stuff in the server as well, guys. Like, it can't just be memes.
It's going to be Morgan against the world. That's it.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Nah, see, Valdes, you completely missed what the point. This was a 2-year project, by the way. I don't know if you know about that. The idea was, right, you send Gideon, right, okay, to the LPL, right, and specifically you send them to IG to learn the dark technology of the IG draft, right? Because IG beat GDG and many teams that are way better than them, right, with madness. Not coherent League of Legends, pure and utter arbitrary madness. And Gideon was there to absorb the knowledge. He doesn't understand Chinese, so there could have been some translation breakdowns and things like that. Hilariously, I did actually hear supposedly Gideon was shot calling in that IG team. I don't know if that's true. I just heard that.
Was that just spamming pings on the map or something?
Yeah. So Gideon's coming back with the dark technology, and him and Morgan are going to covet it in the top lane, right? And they're going to, with this technology, they're going to attempt to corrupt the Korean League and show them what can be done. Like, there is no honor, there is only power, and there is only madness. And that is OK Brian's only way, to victory. They have made a pact with the Cabal, and they're going to attempt to run it. Unfortunately, the Lords of Light are in the bot lane, and they're on their own team. And Envy and Effort are going to do everything in their power to
sabotage them.
To sabotage them. And on a more serious note, Karis was one of those players that was supposed to be. He was like a yesteryear elite prospect. This is where some of my criticism, like not some, my apprehension, sorry, of like Lucid, because Keire was supposed to be like one of the like the next great like mid laners coming at the back, and then it just kind of never like happened. He like petered out. He was like an understudy at like Gen.G, and everyone was like, "Oh, what better place to learn League of Legends than from like Chovy and Peanut?" And it's like, I don't know if he like done any of the homework or wrote any of the notes in class, because I don't know. It's not that he's bad. But, you know, eventually a lottery is going to come round of another young prospect behind you, and you will find yourself replaced if you do not get yourself entrenched and, like, you know, you don't end up part of the LCK furniture. I think, okay, Brian, like, I don't know if I will, like, you know, be, like, going out of my way to, like, watch their games, like, live or something, but I'll be interested just to see what Gideon and Morgan does. I don't actually think Gideon's, like, that good, like, a jungler. He's more just, like, an interesting flipper. He's, like, basically, like, you know, he's going to like try and like find like a very early edge. Is that a good one? Like, who knows? And I think Morgan's just once again in a form of like Elo hell. The meme team's going to enjoy it. We'll see what happens. And if any good team loses to this team, it will be hilarious. By the way, like that is like the only upsides. Yeah. So I don't know.
All I have to say on this one, go on.
Minutes.
It's going to take a 50-minute game,
50 minutes or 70 minutes or whatever. And, you know, Gideon looked okay in the kickoff event. I don't know if you guys saw that. There weren't a lot of people watching, but he looked okay. It was kind of like a for fun little...
Like the jungler versus men.
It was the one with all the positions, yeah.
He was like, okay, you know. I was actually pleasantly surprised, but that also probably doesn't mean much for...
Yeah, all I'll say on this one is just like this, which is the problem is... the irony of Morgan's career is you're used to him being the guy who hinted Chovy when he was back on Animal Life. But the joke is actually he's been one of the better players these last few years because he's been on the bottom feeder teams, unfortunately. Like, he's not even bad. Obviously, look, I mean, he's in the right meta because he is ridiculous for like always picking fucking Renekton. Like, that is beyond him at this point in time. Like, it's absurd. Essentially, he'll always pick it if it's up. But I can't lie, he knows how to play it. He can get some wins on it. He can get kills. So I actually think, unfortunately, if you only remember from Animal Life, he is better than that now. It's just the problem is he's on a pretty bad team. So, like, realistically, we did this order roughly in the right order. Like, we have put them in the right tiers. And there's a reason why these last few teams, there hasn't been too much hope on the roster or projected for the future. Right, I've got the last question is going to be this. This is what we're going to end on. I want everyone to tell me, just in their opinion, who will be the MVP of the LCK. Not who they'll vote. Who would you think is going to be the MVP?
Right, okay.
So on this one, we can go in any angle you want. So go on then, Keire. If you've got one, hit me.
I think because, like, I think the best player, if you look at what's going to go on, I think it'll either be... The problem is it'll either be Guma or Keire, but they can split the vote because they're in the bot lane together. And so, like, they can end up, like, taking each other's, like, votes away unless one gets, like, a front-running, like, lead. But I think it should be, like, one of them. But it could be, like... they should be, like, the best players and winning, like, the majority of the games. With the opening meta, what it looks like everyone's going to be playing, they are going to win so many games. Just being themselves, and I don't know who can withstand that outside some of the real tip-top elite players. So they'd be one of my two. Guma or Keire.
Are you going to go with Valdes?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about spring and this meta, you know, does go on, it's got to be Keire in my mind, right? I think he's just the perfect support for this meta. I mean, besides that, maybe you can see someone like Zeus, you know, turn it on, keep that world's form, and kind of like just stomp the top lane somehow. Well, not somehow. I think he's got it within him, especially when you look at the, you know, the other candidates in the top lane. So, yeah, probably got to be one of those guys from T1, either top or support for me.
Okay, because that's the thing, when I'm thinking of the candidates, I'm actually trying specifically to think, because we're doing spring, like the new changes to the map, we're starting with these new rosters. Like, I think there's three candidates for me. It's either the Gen.G roster really works, in which case I think Chovy will just win. Yeah. Like, he'll just look at the best because it's an awesome team for him to look great in. If it's T1 that's awesome, I actually hope it's Zeus. I've been waiting. Yeah. So what's sad is, this is where I actually hate the idea that I'm just like a T1 here. Like, first of all, being a Faker fan for way longer than anyone telling me any shit. You weren't even watching League of Legends when I was watching this guy, so suck my dick on that one. And then also, I'm a massive fan of carry top laners from Korean League of Legends. My problem with Zeus was he just could not be relied on. It's not even that he would have like ups and downs. He would always fail in the finals. He was like one of the worst criminal offenders for always inting. Even when, like Kingen, he'd be playing like worse players where like, it's not like he's playing like Bin and then he loses. Everyone can lose to Bin or the Shy at their peak or something like. He would lose to the player where it's like, mate, you're better than him even today. You're just playing bad because it's the final. The way way he played at Worlds was fucking sick. From beginning to end, he was amazing. That's why I could tell that it wasn't just T1 fans, mate. It was Faker fans who went crazy about Worlds because they like took the shine off this guy. This guy played a fucking unreal Worlds. Like, it was fantastic. So if he can play like that, he could be the MVP of the whole league. And Koreans love fucking carry top laners, I'll tell you right now. And then the other players, I'll just put this in outside chances. If somehow Hanwha Life's like top 2, then why couldn't Viper be the MVP? I mean, presumably he'll be the one carrying the fuck out the sea. So all I'll do is I'll just go with the idea. I'm going to hope that the super team of Gen.G works. I'll say Chovy just gets to be the MVP of another season. And then we all build him up. Listen, I love this. We all build him up. And then either he does win Worlds and carry the fuck out of it, in which case we were always right. You're all idiots. You don't know anything about it. Or he doesn't win and he looks just sort of like 7.5 out of 10. And then we tell you you're all idiots for not watching LCK and also not none. So you never get to win. If Chovy wins or loses, you as the fan, the Western fan, you're never allowed to win. You're never allowed to be right. We're all elitists. We all watch LCK. And if you don't watch it, then you don't know why Chovy actually is the best. So that's the end of the LCK podcast. I've had to make a lot of tough choices in my career, but thanks to the support of my Patreon community, the Skrilluminati, I never have to make tough financial decisions. So this video and all the rest on my channel are kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Frisky, Pugnatio, Rajcula, Animosity, Jensen Goh, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Torin, and you know it if you've ever heard before, and you'll hear it many times in the future. A special thanks goes out to my main man, Gen.G's minion. Do you want to ask a question in my video AMA? Do you want to be part of one of those long discussions where we talk about whatever you like in esports? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming guests are going to be? Or maybe you want to suggest a topic for a future Thorin's Thoughts type video? Well, if any of these perks or others appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is today and join the Skrilluminati by joining the Patreon link in the description box below.